Greetings and salutations. You've successfully arrived at the Bloody Disgusting Network. The passage of time will now bring you to something strange, unique, and idiosyncratic. Have a good time.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of
constant listeners, and welcome yet again to the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. My name is Rockin' Randall Colburn, and today we are venturing into the inky, mind-altering depths of The Black House. What is The Black House? It is the sequel to The Talisman. These are books that Stephen King co-wrote with Peter Straub. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Another great horror author, modern horror author, whose ghost story we'll be covering next month as part of our Danse Macabre series. So a little plug there. We have a full, very, 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 very long episode on The Talisman. I think it went over 4 hours. I could be wrong. From 2018 or something. And yeah, now we're here for the sequel, which came roughly 15 17 years after the original. So yeah, and this is a strange one, so we're gonna have fun today. But who's joining me? Dan, why don't you in New York City, why don't you introduce yourself, say hello, and tell me about Black House?
This is Dan, Coppice Man Caffrey, and Black House was one of the King books growing up that I did not read. And then I think I probably told this story a few times on the podcast. One summer when my then girlfriend, now wife, was away, she challenged me to read the 14 Stephen King books I hadn't read in one summer. And I think I bet her if I could do it, she would get me a box of Zagnuts and the Surfer Blood's first album, Astro Ghost. That's what I was into at the time. I still like that album. But yeah, and so Black House was one of them. And I think The Talisman was also one of them. So that was the first time reading both of those books. And I loved it then. I love it now. I don't want to say too much because I know we have a lot to get into. I will say I've always liked Black House much better than The Talisman. And rereading it this time around, Black House was actually different than I remember it being back then. I weirdly feel like I appreciate it even more now than I did, 12 or 13 years ago. And I don't know, Peter Straub, I feel like is an interesting force to combine with King. They are both horror writers, but I actually think they're very different horror writers. And I had read Floating Dragon, I think, before I read Black House, which I don't know, it's kind of like I guess it would be the closest thing to compare. It's a very maximalist horror novel about a small town. It gets a little bonkers in the end, and I feel like King and Straub actually bring out the best in each other. They temper each other's more colorful impulses, I think, in a way that really works. So yeah, I'm excited to dive in, and I've been waiting for this book for a really long time, mainly because of the bikers and Beezer. They were different than I remembered too. I actually had a more charitable read of them this time, so I'm excited.
Yeah, this is, I agree. I've been looking forward to this because, especially just doing my research for this episode, this isn't one that people talk about very much, and I think in the larger King fandom, and I'm glad that we are going to provide a definitive episode on it, and it will be definitive.
I feel like it's like the better Dr. Sleep kind of. It's almost that same kind of concept, but in my opinion, executed better. But I feel like people, at least readers, have more love for Dr. Sleep, strangely enough, than they do for Black House.
Yeah, interesting. We can talk more about that in a bit. Dan in Chicago, say hello. Tell me about Black House.
This is Dan Postloke Flieger.
Tonal Flieger.
I thought Tonal.
Wild thing, Randall. But no, I just like the mush mouth. Hey, come on, Postloke. Like, I actually kind of like the way that sounds. So this was actually my first time reading it. I've got about 10 King books left to finish, and I'm pretty much current, save for Dreamcatcher, which I still need to finish. But yeah, no, I enjoyed this. I read The Talisman many years ago, so it wasn't quite fresh in my memory, but a lot of it was coming back while I was reading this. And I am surprised too. Like, it's not as popular as I think this would be, considering it's, kind of a modern book compared, to his other releases. But perhaps Caffrey being bribed to finish it, there's like symptom of, popularity. Like people have to get bribed with Zag nuts just to read this book. But I've always found that knowledge is its own treat.
I've never had a Zagnut. I always just remember it from
Great Outdoors,
Beetlejuice.
right?
No, Beetlejuice.
Oh, that's right. In the Beetlejuice, they have it. Great. The first place I saw was the Great Outdoors. I think Dan Aykroyd or John Candy uses it to lure away a bear. They're delicious. They're like toasted. Sorry, I sound like such a. They're delicious.
Our new sponsor is Zagnut.
I would love to. Are you Zagnut? If you're, I don't know. I think they're a Mars company, but
what is it? What's in it?
It's like a toasted coconut candy bar with a peanut butter filling, and it doesn't have chocolate on it. It's just like it's like peanut butter and shaved coconut. No, have you ever had a Chico stick? It's kind of like that, but in a candy bar form.
I haven't. I was born in the 1920s, so I'm not really familiar with it.
yeah, penny candies and whizzers. Yeah,
The licorice whips.
So yeah, I just remember being scared because like Beetlejuice lures the fly with it and then kills it in Beetlejuice, and I felt bad for the fly. So anyways, wait, Fleer, what edition did you read of Black House?
So I was actually using the audiobook.
Nice.
Because I was traveling, and then I realized I was too far behind, and you can read about like 3 or 4 times quicker. So I ended up just getting the Kindle version.
Nice.
So just first half was audiobook, second half was all Kindle.
Yeah, and Jen, you did audiobook too, right?
I did.
We'll talk more about that in a bit because I would love to hear more about that. Dan Caffrey, what edition did you read? You got original?
Look, you know how I roll, man. First edition all the way. It's right here.
Nice.
It's heavy as fuck, though. It's a really heavy book. Yeah, and this is the same. And it's weird though because it has this footprint on the front that's a different texture than the rest of the book, which is glossy. And so I kept thinking the book was dirty, but it's not. It just the footprint feels.
I was gonna say, did somebody step on your copy?
Hey, maybe it was the fisherman himself that came by with a very tiny foot. Came by and stepped on this.
Jen, say hello and tell us about Black House.
Hi, this is Traveling Jen Adams, and this was, I first read Black House a couple years ago when I was on my chronological reread. I did not like the Talisman very much. Apologies to everyone who loves it. But so I was really not looking forward to this at all. And I kind of was just in a zone of like, I've got to get through it. I'm just going to grit my teeth and bear it. And I was shocked by how much I loved it. Like I've got a big issue with it. But other than that one big issue, which we'll talk about, I really enjoy it. And I think partly it kind of sums up my feelings about the Dark Tower series in general is I like the books that are more set in our world that have like dips into the Dark Tower. Cause I also love the Drawing of the Three, which is mostly set in New York City, if I'm remembering correctly. And I mean, I guess this is not technically a Dark Tower book. It would be technically like Dark Tower adjacent, although it is the last part of it is almost like just a commercial for the last 3 books. It's like, this is what it's going to be, and I found myself really enjoying that a lot more than I was expecting. I'm not really the biggest Dark Tower head, but I think I just really loved it. I find it really upsetting and scary in a lot of ways, but also fun and silly. And like we were talking about, like just kind of light, as dark as the subject matter is in places, like it doesn't feel like it connects to like themes that I usually can like get really kind of heavy about, Like it's just a good story.
It's fun.
And the writing is great too. Yeah. Like so many like sections I pulled for word processor because it's just, feel like it's a really well written story too.
Yeah. It's an interesting book because I was trying to explain it to my wife and I'm like, it's really funny and kind of silly at times. And it's about like a child rapist and cannibal.
Right.
But it's such a, I feel like there's a lot of humor though that went into the creation of this book and is kind of, buried in the narration, which we'll talk more about. But I read, the funny thing is I own the first edition. I bought it when it first came out. But I was on a trip and I was like, I didn't have the original with me. I should just buy a copy to start reading while I'm on my trip. And then, so I got this paperback. It's like pocketbooks fiction. It's got the ladder going up into the square gray sky on the front of it. And I'm kind of glad I had this version just because the original, like Dan said, is so heavy. This version is a little bit more manageable, but also very, very, very thick.
Can you hold it up to the cover again? I just want to see that. I've not seen that version.
Yeah. I like that.
I haven't either. Yeah. This is the cover, the reference
problem too the
Oh,
big
nice.
first
Cool.
editions. I love reading them, but I don't like to take them out of the house just because a lot of them are, they're kind of falling apart. And so, yeah, I feel like I need to maybe start doing paperbacks for some of these bigger books because I only read this in my house and I was afraid to like take it on.
Yeah,
airplane
one
and
of my
everything.
favorite things is when I go to those little local libraries and I find like either the paperback or the hardcover, and like this way I can double up for whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are libraries, man. I found like 2 or 3 King First editions. And the one around the corner from me the other day had all of Nick Cutter's books. The Troop,
Oh shit.
the D. I know, not all of them, I guess, but the Deep, the Troop, and Little Heaven. And I almost grabbed them, but then I'm like, I've read all of them. I would probably only reread the Troop, and I'd rather someone else get them, But I was really, I'm like, man, when do you see that happen?
Yeah, when do you see that? It's
were
usually just
gone.
like cookbooks from 1950 or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, my version came out in 2012, and it's pocketbooks. I like it. It's nice and firm in my hands. That sounds dirty, but yeah, I liked Black House when I first read it. I remember reading it in college, in high school, I believe. I can't remember, when was it? 2001. Okay, yeah. So it was. I read it right when it came out, and it was right after 9/11 this came out. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And I feel like that might have something to do with perhaps it being eclipsed in many ways, or maybe just so related to this event that people don't particularly enjoy talking about it. But I remember it being sort of an escape for me during that time because it was extremely stressful, obviously, and very scary. And I remember sort of losing myself in the pages to this. And I remember loving how long it was because I didn't want the book to end. That was a bit more of a struggle now that I'm an adult and I have many more responsibilities. And I was like, oh, this book is 820 pages, or at least my version was. So, but yeah, it's an interesting one. This is my first time rereading it since then. And Jen, I've always thought of it as a Dark Tower book in a lot of ways because I think the memories that persisted from it were all Dark Tower related. I didn't remember a lot of the non-Dark Tower story. And I think that's because at that time I was so desperate for Dark Tower content. Because Wizard and Glass was my favorite book at that time and is still one of my favorite King books. And, he teases, we talked about this on our Wizard and Glass episode, but he teases the future of the Dark Tower at the end of that. And then he, obviously almost died. And it had been so long since, Wizard and Glass had come out. And then he did Hearts in Atlantis, where he, introduced Ted Brodigan and the notion of breakers. And I was like, we're going somewhere. Like he's teasing all these things. He's setting up the next books. And it was so anticipatory for me. And and then later this year, we will get to Wolves of the Calla, which is very exciting. But yeah, this is in many ways sort of a prologue to that.
I was going to say, I think the commercial for the Dark Tower, the way Jen put it, is really funny because and we'll get to it, but there are parts where it's like, oh, I have a feeling there's some other gunslingers out there.
Yeah. Well, and also too, and I know I'll dive into it in King's Dominion. For me, it sort of, because I love the Dark Tower, but I've talked about this ad nauseum. I feel like it gets a little unwieldy after a certain point, and I kind of don't like how it starts touching every last King book. To me, this is kind of the golden age of it when, oh, cool, we're seeing it really connect to these other novels. And yeah, so for me, it felt like these really nice Easter eggs to find rather than, oh, great, another fucking thing compared to connected to energy vampires and breakers and Stephen King himself. Like, for me, this is kind of that sweet spot ramp up before we get to all that. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So, let's just hop into the Derry Public Library and talk about some background.
Mike Hanlon, if you see...
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Tell Mike Hanlon that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him. Tell him. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, Tosha. Get out! Get out!
All right. So this came out September 15th, 2001. Yes, just 4 days after 9/11. It's put out by Random House. And I don't know, I was talking to Mike and we were like, would they delay it? And it's kind of like, why? I mean, I think that was for me, like I said, it was kind of an escape from the news during that time. I remember sneaking off to go just like be by myself and read this book. And And I imagine a lot of people felt the same at the time. So I couldn't find a ton of history about this book. I have some quotes from Peter Straub. I haven't seen much where King talks about this book. He was still recovering from his injury at that time. And perhaps it being so close to 9/11, he maybe just didn't feel comfortable doing press. And a lot of the stuff I found from Peter Straub is stuff that he was reflecting on years after the fact. So one thing I do think is interesting is that the Wisconsin setting was King's idea, but it was, I think, to pay tribute in some ways to Peter Straub's childhood. I think King always writes stuff in Maine, and Straub spent a lot of his childhood in Wisconsin going on vacations. So according to the King Wiki, although it's been documented elsewhere, French Landing, where the book takes place, is a fictionalized version of the town Trempealeau, Wisconsin. I'm probably saying that wrong. Cheeseheads, feel free to correct me. There you will find Chase Street, Sumner Street, Queen Street, and the famous Sandbar. Also, Centralia is named after the nearby small town of Centerville, Wisconsin, which is located at the intersection of Highway 93 and Highway 35. So I think some of that scene setting we get in the early going, which is so detailed and so lush in a lot of ways, comes from Straub because he spent so much time there when they were young. And and I think this collaboration, the way I came to think about it after a while, especially after reading some interviews, is that this was really a way for two friends to hang out. I get the vibe that him and Peter have a lot of fun together. As we talked about in our episode on the Talisman, this kind of collaboration came to be because they both admired each other's books. They met in London. They met at a bar. They were hanging out, and then their families would visit each other. And they say that the idea for writing a book together came when they were up late one night after the wives had gone to bed, and they were just like pounding beer and got really tanked and basically said, let's write a book together. And then there's a funny story of them driving to the mall for some reason or another, which was like a 20-minute drive each way. And King apparently kept forgetting things, whether it's his credit card, whether he was buying the wrong thing and to go back and return it. And King and Peter were doing those drives together. And he says that's when they mapped out the majority of the Talisman story, was during those kind of long drives back and forth. And it seemed to be a pretty seamless process. When he was reflecting on it, Straub said the only thing he would really change was he felt like the book was too long. And they already had cut tons of stuff from the Talisman, like once they got writing. And apparently the similar thing happened with Black House, where their outline, they were like, oh no, do we have enough material? But I think they're both a bit long-winded and turned out just fine.
Yeah, I can imagine them like getting drunk and like slamming beers and playing Stratego, and he's just like, Steven, you gotta cut some pages. No, Peter.
No, Peter. Yeah, I don't even know what Pierce Straub sounds like.
Yeah,
I think we always just imagine every other person we talk about who's not Stephen King sounding like Mike's impression of Dino DeLaurentis. Steven.
Yeah. It's funny. I know I was thinking the same thing, Flieger, about like them playing a game or something. He's like, wait, I got an idea. We had a werewolf.
It's like Monopoly. He's like the little terrier. He's like, we had a werewolf. Yeah.
We need bees, and you owe me $200.
So I've got some quotes here from Peter Straub. I found, thanks to Losers Club archivist, historian Bryant Burnett, he helped drudge up some Peter Straub interviews for me. And some interesting questions here. And Publishers Weekly, there was a pretty lengthy interview, and they asked him about the origins of Black House. And Peter said, the bluntest answer I can give you is that King sort of asked me if I'd be interested. A more nuanced answer is that Stephen and I had been very interested in this, seeing that he and I again seemed to be converging a bit in what we were thinking about. We both seemed to be obsessing about Rebecca at the same time. And he's talking about the Daphne du Maurier novel that, if you listen to our Bag of Bones episode, that novel was a huge influence on Bag of Bones. And I suppose Straub had a similar obsession around that same time. And they were also both thinking about Bartleby the Scrivener. And I remember, Jen, do you remember what book it is where King keeps referencing Bartleby? I feel like it was something, it might have been Bag of Bones. I can't remember. But definitely something that was on both of their minds. Peter
think
says,
Bag of Bones, because isn't he... Isn't Mike Noonan like teaching the girl about who Bartleby is? Am I making that up?
Oh yeah, I think you're right.
I might be wrong, but I think so.
I think she maybe read it, or she was aware of it, because he's like, oh, how is this like white trash waitress aware of that?
Yes,
remember
that is
Jen-
exactly right.
It was
Fleer.
I think Jen, you were on that episode, right? Me, you,
I was
and
not
Randall,
on
like-
that one.
Oh,
No.
so- maybe it was
I think
anyway.
it was Anna.
Anna, maybe. Yeah, but we were like, oh, he kind of like dressed her down before you even knew her.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Okay. And then Peter says, and we both had come to the same conclusions independently, that the book would be mainly about Jack Sawyer, that Jack Sawyer would be in some melancholic position and would not remember what he had once done, that the point of the book would be the recovery of that achievement through some necessity, and that it would be a lot more like a horror novel than a fantasy novel. All of that was gratifying and made us feel less anxious. I think we both did feel anxious. You didn't know if you were going to endanger your friendship or enhance it, and you never know how much control you're going to give up or how much you want to give up. He said to the publication Tenebris, or Tenebris, I'm probably saying it wrong, Steve came up with the notion of collaborating again. He remembered an idea I had mentioned during the first book, and I guess it intrigued him. Since he is an honorable guy, he asked me if I would consider working with him on a book based on this old idea. And then he referenced the old idea in a different interview with a Nordic Stephen King fan club. It was published in a Swedish journal that I absolutely am not even going to try to pronounce. So I'll just say the Nordic Stephen King fan club.
So is it called Der Kingen Sagen?
You're not far off. But yeah, it was, the idea was a reflection about just how bad a house could be. Exactly. Which is kind of funny because it's such a broad statement, but I don't know. I thought that was kind of clever and funny. And it reminded me in some ways of the Talisman, because there's a lot of bad houses in the Talisman. There's the Black Hotel where the Talisman is housed, and then there's also the Sunlight Home for Boys where, you know, the boys endure a lot of badness. So I think there's a lot of haunted places in their previous collaboration, and I think that's something they wanted to center on again with this. On the writing process, Peter said, it was as if the book had its own sail and wind. We really knew where we were going. I went to Florida about 1.5 years ago where Steve had rented a place. He got a room for me at a health resort nearby. He came over to my bungalow and I went to his, and we made up a fast forward version of most of the novel. When we were done, we had about 35 or 37 single space pages, but in 14-point print because Steve's eyes are lousy and he needed big print. It looks skimpy to me. I said, "Are you sure this is going to be enough stuff?" He laughed and said, "You bet it is. As I discovered when I began, I think I wrote 50 pages without ever getting off the first page." And we'll talk about those first 50 pages because I know some people have a lot of opinions about them. This was in Publishers Weekly. And then he continued, like a ping pong game, except with this one guy in New York and the other in Maine or Florida, and with a long table. I shouldn't admit this, but it's written chunk by chunk. I had to start it because one of Steve's better ideas was that we set it in the heart of Wisconsin, which I knew from childhood vacations. Speaking of sort of their differences and similarities, he said, my tendency to linger over visual details in support of a kind of solidity was held in check by King's momentum. And sometimes his desire to zip along was contained by mine to slow things down. In the end, the pacing feels just about right.
Oh,
we should also say too that he doesn't tweet a lot, but I don't know, Peter Straub's Twitter account is very funny to me. And if you tweet at him, he'll probably retweet you. He's actually done it to several of our listeners. One of our listeners, Brett, actually he did tweet at him about, you know, the first 50 pages and whose idea was it to do that kind of, you know, bird's eye view thing. And then he just has really random trees. This made me laugh. He wrote, this is like back in November, he wrote, I kind of hate to say this, but that Michael Che HBO special both blows and sucks. Like he just tweet, I don't know. It's like very, his Twitter account's much like his ranker. He's maybe not as prolific as King, but in a weird way more unique and idiosyncratic. So I don't know. It's worth a follow for sure.
Ripped off Mel Brooks too. She's gone from suck to blow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Well, yeah, our listener Brett did tweet at him and he asked him about the first like 150 pages, I believe, of Black House, which are done in this sort of sweeping cinematic style. And I believe Straub responded to him and said, oh, Steve and I did it equally or something. Like he gave a very non-answer, like to who, I think it was like who did more. And he was basically like, we both wrote and rewrote each other's work, you know?
With Richard Chismar, he said they kind of did that too, where like they would kind of send each other like a chunk at a time and they would maybe go through and do a little edit and then add their chunk and kind of hot potatoed it back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like at least with Talisman, they did pretty big chunks back and forth. He said it was 100 to 150 pages they would send each other.
That's wild.
Yeah. He didn't say much about about this, like how much they were writing and doing to each other, but he said it all happened over email. And it's kind of funny because they talk about it email like it's relatively new in these interviews, which in some ways it kind of was in terms of the accessibility of it, but they talk about, he's like, oh yeah, I would send it as an attachment in an email. So
not a fax.
Yeah.
He just tweeted about Stephen King the other day too. I don't know if y'all saw this, but Patch the freebooter, who I don't know who he is, but he's verified, said, not saying Stephen King isn't a very smart man, but there's more intelligence in Straub's writing, also something elusive, a faint, anxious sorrow, which I agree with the second part. But then Peter Straub retweeted and said, I love this generous and sensitive take on my work. As for Steve King, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. So it was a sweet little standing up for him. I
like that anxious sorrow, because that does seem to me anyway, capture his tone, both in Black House and his solo books too. There's a deeper sadness, and also, I don't mean this as a put down at all. I think his writing's a tad vaguer than King's, Clive Barker's a little bit like sort of getting a little bit more of the unknown rather than tangibly describing a monster that's coming out. And once again, I think that style really complements King well. So his Twitter account's real fun. I like it.
I do think it's funny, like when these guys who are just these brilliant writers and can write these sentences that just stop you in your tracks, and then he's like, Michael Chase special sucks.
Yeah, it's like I'm looking forward to the thread on like the Will Smith slap from Peter Straub.
He had a tweet about seeing the Silverchair drummer, the drummer of that band Silverchair in New York, but I don't really understand it. It was like, it's something like I saw the drummer of Silverchair coming out of a tobacco shop, and I said, whoa, a tobacco shop. Like, I think the joke is that maybe the tobacco shop is more of the rarity than seeing a film. I don't know, but Silverchair is so random. Who knows?
That is so weird.
How old is Peter Straub? Because I'm not familiar with his work other than the Talisman.
He's almost 80, I think.
So
he'll be 80. He just turned 79. So
how does he know who Silverchair is?
Maybe he just keeps up with the band.
Yeah.
He's like, I was a big, I like Freak Show a little bit more than Frog Stomp, although most people would. Is that their second album, Freak Show? I don't know if I'm getting that right.
I just remember the We'll Make It Up to You in the Year 2000 song.
Yeah. The singer's name is Daniel John, and that's my name. So it's big fan.
I like Frog Stomp. I mean, it was a good, post-grunge Nirvana ripoff kind of thing, but I dug it. Yeah.
Fat boy.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
That music video of Tomorrow, the pig, the little pig
the
boy.
piggy.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. Another quote from Tenebris. Straub says about King, he is more straightforward than I am. Far less given, this is kind of what you said, Dan, far less given to complexity of both plot and characterization. This relative simplicity is a great strength. We both love the sweep of narrative. We share an old-fashioned love for the novel form. We are both attracted to grandeur, and we are intensely interested in the various manifestations of evil. And I guess our senses of humor must coincide at many points because we can reduce each other to helpless laughter. And I want to remember that because I sometimes think they're trying to make each other laugh in this book.
Oh, I think
so.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fun. Something I never would have picked up on in my first read, but something I feel like I got this time around. On the length of Talisman and Black House, in Tenebris, Peter said, this time around, the voice is considerably more elevated, riper, and plummier than heretofore. The direness of the situation seemed to call for an increase in dignity. In the Nordic Fan Club interview, he said, the book wound up being longer than we had anticipated. It is almost exactly as long as the Talisman, which is funny because he said in another interview, the one problem he has with the Talisman is that it's too long. So.
Oh, dude, that book feels long. Black House did not feel long to me the way the Talisman
I agree.
does.
Yeah. And maybe that's because the Talisman is a bit more episodic in the way that its storytelling unfolds, whereas this book really moves and very much has sort of a, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
A propulsive sort of narrative despite the length.
Yeah, Talisman, despite being on the road pretty much the entire time, feels like it's kind of repeating the same beat over and over. And know what I think it is? I think it's because the Talisman is leaning more on the conceit of the whole Twinner thing, both with the characters and the places. And there's a little bit of that here, but I mean, Talisman is literally like, all right, we're going to see the Midworld version of this thing. Now we're seeing the real thing. I mean, it goes so back and forth that it gets a little taxing to me after a while. Although I do love Wolf. I mean, there's parts of the Talisman I really enjoy.
Yeah, I really love so much of the Talisman, and I loved it when I was young. I will say, reading it for the pod, and I talk about this in our episode, there is something exhausting about that book. Whereas I didn't feel that as much.
Yeah, I'm there with you for that. Talisman, I actually got very annoyed by Wolf, but I also did the audiobook, and
Oh,
hearing
yeah.
him constantly be like, Jack, Jack, Jack.
Did they have like Bill Fagerback doing him or
Oh.
something on the
Just remember,
on the
Jack
audiobook?
is so mean to Wolf, and like
He
I
is.
remember feeling for him. But
Oh,
yeah,
Wolf is such a tragic character. I love
Yeah.
that. Wolf's great, but yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I was
That's
like, he
the
just-
one thing I do like about the Talisman.
yeah, like he drags him to like our world, and then he just like fucking wastes away. It's so sad. There was a talk about a bridge story that would bridge the gap between Talisman and Black House. It never happened, obviously, but they addressed it in the Nordic interview. They asked Peter, they said early on there was some talk that King should write what he called a bridge between the Talisman and Black House on his own and publish it as an ebook. This book should update us on Jack Sawyer's life the last 20 years. This information came from King's agent, Ralph Vincianza, in an interview in Publishers Weekly. But when we asked you about this, you didn't know anything about it. Do you know something about this now? Will there be a bridge? Are you involved at all? Peter said, quite brusquely, he said, the bridge story is still completely up in the air. If it happens at all, I'll start it and King will finish it. If Steve reads this, he'll be surprised because we haven't even discussed the matter. My editor thought I might begin it, then pass it along to Steve. And that's all he said about it. And obviously it never happened.
I don't think you need it.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
like
got like a
the
feel
distance.
like it. You know, it's like we revisit this character. You know, I think we get everything we need in between.
Yeah.
If I can weigh in too, like I think it's funny that the Scandinavian Journal is like the one interview you found, because I think it makes sense if after 9/11 he's injured, so the news in America is not going to cover anything but that.
Yeah.
He's not traveling and doing interviews, and this is kind of the time where they were like, we're not satisfied with a phone interview. You know, Good Morning America wants Stephen King
Yeah.
in the seat there, but it would make sense that like a foreign publication is like, oh well, we're not going to fly you out to Sweden for this interview, but it sounds like they got some of the best like nuggets out of him and Straub.
Yeah, absolutely. On the Dark Tower connections, Peter said, it was my idea to incorporate it. One reason is that I wanted to know what that stuff was. I had no idea what a breaker was, what the tower was, what the Crimson King was. And then you and me both, dude, at that time. And the Talisman is all but a Dark Tower book. When I suggested it to Steve, he said, I'm glad you said that because I don't know if I can keep it out. At this point, everything I write is connected to it. Which
It
is
was just weighing so heavily on him at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, you think about Hearts, and you think about From a Buick 8, which were the books that he kind of had worked on immediately prior to this. Because I think Black House sort of, I'm not sure when they started it. I couldn't find like a clear answer on that. But I have a feeling it predates to some degree his accident. And I think maybe it was something he wasn't working on while he was recovering, and he was working on Dreamcatcher. And then they sort of reconvened once he started, finished Dreamcatcher, and then he finished, some segments of Black House. But I get the feeling like this was something they were working on over a period of time. So I think that because, Dreamcatcher doesn't have any Dark Tower in it at all.
Right.
And I think that, that book to him was just this personal portrait of, or this personal project to help him get through his pain, and obviously the opioids. And maybe Peter was just like, I don't want your drug brain fucking up my book. So
or maybe he was like, I don't want to drag him into this, like having not know how to write yet,
Yeah.
But
It'd be funny
I
if
want to
he's
ask.
like, oh, go ahead, John. I was just gonna say it'd be funny if he's like, I got an idea for Black House. Shit weasels.
Yeah, that was the original story, and Straub was like, no, we're just gonna wipe the shit on one of the characters every time we mention him. But Fleeger, I wanted to ask you, because you said this was your first read, right?
Yes.
So and I know how big of a tower head you are. So like, were you aware that there was this much tower stuff?
No,
in it?
I did not. I would have read this a lot sooner.
Yeah,
but I was getting on like these kicks because I haven't read the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, and I just started reading those, so I kept putting this book off from time to time because like those were so fun and like engaging. And I think I started this book and I did not like the narration of like the omniscient, I don't know what you call that, like that presence that sort of can read thoughts.
Yeah.
So I was a little turned off from it, but then once the back third of the book is like pure Dark Tower stuff. So I wish I had read it sooner, but but it also it's peripheral in a lot of ways too. It's not like Roland is featured per se.
Right.
And we already, a lot of the information about the breakers had already, well, I guess it was actually published here first, but I had already read the Tower books, so I already knew about the breakers from those.
Right.
I don't think this exposed any new information about the breakers other than maybe a little detail of their living conditions.
Yeah, I feel like definitely this stuff is sort of, reintroduced in the actual Dark Tower books. I think here, it's really about setting the scene of Endworld, and this Mr. Munchin character, who I think is, very singular to this book. And I really love that character, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Straub on whether a sequel is in the cards. At the time, he said, sometime after 5 years, probably. We sort of know a bit about it. Besides, fantasy novels are supposed to be in trilogies. He told the Nordic magazine, I'd say the chances for a third volume look pretty good. Obviously, that never happened. Although there's some speculation, including on this pod, that Fairy Tale might have some connections to the Talisman world. That is just a guess. We don't know. And Peter Straub's name is not on it. So who knows? But
so fantasies are supposed to come in 5 out of 7. And that's what George R. Martin taught us. So I guess the idea of an unfinished fantasy series actually is sort of par for the course.
Yeah. Maybe Joe Hill can finish it.
Can I, Caffrey, because you read a lot of fantasy. What do you think about the idea that fantasy should be in trilogies? Is that just pure Tolkien, or how do you take that?
I think fantasy is whoever your mind wants it to be. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think traditionally probably. Well, I don't know, because it's funny he says that, because I actually can't think of a lot of fantasy series that stop at 3. I feel like most of them are longer.
Like Wheel of Time and stuff.
Yeah, Wheel of Time, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. Terry Pratchett's stuff isn't, it's all in the same world. It's not so plot connected, but there's like 30 or 40 of those books. So,
but he might just be thinking of the 3 Lord of the Rings novels.
Yeah, that's true. And King at least is so indebted to those. So yeah, I maintain. Maybe I'll eat my words in a few months, but I maintain that Fairy Tale, whether it's a Talisman continuation or not, I think it's going to have some very big surprise connections, and I think it's going to be some kind of venture back into Midworld in a very big way. But yeah, all the summary stuff sounds like Talisman lore, all the twinning and whatever else. So I will see. Even though I'm not necessarily hungry for another Talisman
more Sawyer
installment, more Sawyer per se, I'm excited just by like a surprise king. Even Gwendy's Final Task, won't go too much into it, but. And even though that was already connected a lot to the Dark Tower world, some of the stuff we see in Gwendy's Final Task was really, I thought, satisfyingly surprising. So I'm just hungry for that kind of thing. And I also love not knowing much about a book before it comes out. So I would love it if Fairy Tale comes out and just has all these connections to other King books.
Yeah, if you want to listen to our thoughts on Gwendy's Final Task, I believe, Caffrey, you're on it. Flieger, you're on it. Jen, you weren't on that, were you?
I was not.
Were you on
it
it too,
yet.
Randall? I think you're on it.
Yeah, I was on it.
And Justin, I think.
Justin, too.
Justin. Yeah, that's in our Patreon. And I would highly recommend, if you've read it, listening to it. We really go in depth about what it could mean for the future of the Dark Tower in King's work. And I think we had a really illuminating discussion about that and how all of it could tie to Fairy Tale and thus Talisman and Black House. So lots to digest there. That's in our Patreon, patreon.com/thebarons. Okay, let's talk about critical response. Pretty positive reviews. Entertainment Weekly said, skeptics shouldn't let the word fantasy scare them. This is no namby-pamby unicorn tale.
Wait, was that Entertainment Weekly you said? Was that King writing the review? Because he was writing for them at this time.
But rather a thrilling epic packed with horrifying monsters and a surprisingly potent emotional payoff. Writing fiction is generally a solo exercise, and collaborations often smack of gimmickry. Yet this partnership brings up both authors' strengths, King's down and dirty storytelling and Straub's more sweeping literary style. As Jack reads Bleak House to Henry, the novelist observed that the story gathers steam and carries both reader and listener along in its train. The same holds true for Black House, and what a ride it is. They give it an A. I love things like what a ride. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like you're like parodying a critic when you.
I know, right?
Oh, dude, I remember.
That's just where it starts.
I remember I had a paperback copy of The Perfect Storm when that came out, and I think it was probably from EW or People or something, and it said like a white knuckle thriller, and that was the first time I heard that phrase. And now it's funny because you look at any review, it has like, roller coaster, white knuckle thriller.
Yeah, I remember editing like some of the music reviews from like the interns back at Consequence, and they'd be like, it sounds like this band mixed with this band, and I was like, it's not really like that's kind of been played out, that sort of approach.
The New York Times said, though the novel, like the house, starts to show some cracks by the end, and the conclusion is far too tidy, Jack's saga overflows with dark wit, sly literary references, suspense, and heartache. What elevates Black House beyond ordinary horror novels is the richness of its cast, from a bunch of philosophy reading bikers to a sleazy journalist to a grieving mother on the brink of madness. I found this interesting review from the Washington Post, written by Neil Gaiman right after American Gods came out. So I feel like he was a pretty good person to review this. And his review, I think, has some points I want to touch on later when we talk about the themes, but I'll just read these sections from it. He says, it is a book that exists on the borders of genre. If it's not serial killer romance, it's not a serial killer romance, although the fisherman is unquestionably a superhuman serial killer possessed of and by strange powers. It is too dark to be a fantasy, but too light, too deeply sunny to be at its heart a horror novel. Sometimes the collaborative process has its downside. On occasion, the characters seem like counters being pushed back and forth across a board, and there is a final plot twist that smacks less of inevitability than of the authors checking off the last item on their to-do list. The use of the present tense, which could too easily get wearing over 600 pages, for the most part keeps the narrative voice supple, informal, and fresh, although it can on occasion make one feel as if one is reading a film script. Indeed, in one sequence when Irma's body is found, the authors retread the same half hour from a number of points of view, and their dogged fidelity to the present tense actively becomes a handicap. Such quibbles aside, Black House allows us to see two master craftsmen, each at the top of his game, collaborating with every evidence of enormous enjoyment on a summery heartland gothic. The book is hugely pleasurable and repays a reader in search of horror, adventure, or of any of the other joys, both light and dark, one can get from the best work of either of these two scribbling fellows. If I had a better British accent, I would have read it in a British accent. And then I found a negative review from the AV Club. It wasn't negative necessarily, but it wasn't. Most of the reviews I found that I could find online, a lot have been scrubbed, were mostly pretty positive. But yeah, this one says, those who haven't read The Talisman, the Dark Tower series, and Hearts in Atlantis will often be at sea here. Worse, they'll be lost amid purple prose that piles up rhetorical questions, ascribes emotions and interpretations to the reader, and chummily narrates in the first person plural. The clutching, overly personal style, which eventually extends to King and Straub directly referencing themselves, gets irritatingly heavy-handed about 2 pages in, but it alternates with a more straightforward, and to King fans, both familiar and gripping style, as the narrative voice changes from chapter to chapter. Stylistically, Black House is far less integrated than The Talisman. Narratively, its heavy reliance on King's mythology makes it seem like his book rather than a true collaborative effort. Not that it matters. And that's the
AV Club editor, Randall.
High school Randall Colburn.
Senior editor.
So yeah, those were the reviews I found of it. Did those surprise you, or do they sound pretty on point?
I think that sounds pretty on point. I mean, even there. I mean, there's not really one negative one of the bunch, and I agree that you don't hear these reviews talking about the big themes at play like they do in, I don't know, The Shining or The Stand or something like that. Mostly because I don't think there are a ton of themes here beyond the really basic stylistic ones, right? The idea of twinners, dark and light, everything. But those aren't even themes, right? Like, I don't know if this book necessarily has a thesis beyond, your past catches up with you or something like that, right?
Right.
And so,
right.
and that's fine. I don't mean that as a knock against the book, like you were saying, Randall. I kind of like that these are two dudes just flexing a little bit and having some spooky fun, as it were. So the fact, I think most of these reviews are pretty on point. Just talking about the literary prowess of both of these guys, rather than them having anything especially deep to say with this book. And that's not to say they don't have deeper things to say in other books, because they do. But
if you listen to our podcast, they do, because
exactly,
we go deep into that shit. And
but for me, it's like a stylistic exercise more than anything.
Well, before we stab into what themes there are in this and discuss some Dark Tower stuff, let me just read a synopsis really quick. This is from the back of my pocketbooks edition. Former Los Angeles homicide detective Jack Sawyer, now living in a small Wisconsin town, is called on by the local police chief, Can Jack help his inexperienced force solve a string of gruesome murders that has struck the region? Although Jack cannot recall the events 20 years ago that led him to a parallel universe to save his dying mother, he senses an otherworldly force behind the killings. Drawn back to the territories in his hidden past, Jack must now encounter the ferocious evils sheltered inside a terrifying house at the end of a deserted tract of forest. It's wild because there's so much else.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you even summarize this book?
It just makes it sound like a haunted house story.
Yeah.
Like, not much else. But
Yeah, and I feel like we're not really in the house very much at all. Like, you really don't get to it until the very end, you know?
Yeah, and even like the Hollywood thing, like I know they kind of tease him about that throughout the book, but there's not much about his personality that is like a Hollywood guy. So I don't know if it's worth being like hotshot Bosch wannabe Jack Sawyer, you know, like it has very little to do with his character.
I did kind of laugh every time, like, oh yeah, Hollywood Jack, and like Beezer, he's like, hey, Hollywood, like, but it's he just seems like a pretty normal cop to me.
The only time that the joke paid off was when the Drudge Report, when they put his name as Jack Hollywood in quotes Sawyer. Remind me of the Simpsons. They're like Frank Grimy Grimes. I feel like.
I would just love it if Jack was like wearing shades like all the time and like a shirt on, like, you know, an open I don't know, silk shirt, like with his belly exposed.
They're like they're like, Jack, it's night. Why do you have your sunglasses on? Hey, stars are always out, baby.
Yeah, just imagine that he's really hot, and that's why they call him Hollywood, because he's dreamy, you know.
That might be true.
Like, I feel like he's maybe the least interesting part of the book, though.
I was gonna say, when you mentioned like the notion of like just the idea of his personality, like if he doesn't act very Hollywood, and I was going to be like, I don't know if he acts much like anything. So
he doesn't. Yeah.
Well, we can talk more about that in a little bit. I want to talk about the sort of ideas in this in a section we call the hook.
Yes. Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
Here in the hook, we talk about the themes, the ideas, and kind of the larger thrust of this one. And as we sort of alluded to, I feel like the last several books, I almost feel like I've been Joker-fied after a while of doing. I feel like I've been leading so many book episodes that have spawned these really wonderful and edifying conversations about incredibly deep topics. I mean, that's like I think like the era that we're at in King, talking about Desperation or Dreamcatcher or Bag of Bones, On Writing, Hearts in Atlantis. Like, we're digging, like, a lot of these books are indebted in so many ways to King's life, whether it's his sobriety, whether it's his college activism, his views on politics, car accident, like life and death. I mean, Dreamcatcher, man, for as silly as that book is, you know, in its own way, shit weasels and everything, like, we got in the weeds on that one, talking about the way that book muses on death and randomness and sort of like the sicknesses that sprout up inside us as we get older, and it's heavy stuff.
Do y'all think he was just I mean, I think the car accident has a lot to do with it, because we've talked about it a lot, that, you know, the idea of learning to write again, but also, do you think he was maybe just at an age where he was beginning to accept the fact that he maybe had something to say, and the fact that he wasn't just a horror guy anymore? Because on writing especially, he sort of toggles between those two worlds, between really wanting to be just known as a genre guy and kind of turning his nose up at theme a little bit, but then also really embracing it. We talk about that struggle and sometimes that contradiction on the On Writing episode. And I wonder, maybe now, I don't know how exactly old he was when during this era, but do you think he's maybe just not seeing theme as such a bad word anymore, or not seeing prestige as such a bad thing anymore? I don't have any interviews to back that up. That was just something I wondered.
Well, our Bag of Bones episode, definitely that was his mindset. We talk a lot about that in that episode. That was the book he probably did the most press for of anything I've really seen, at least in the 90s and 2000s.
He had to outsell Clancy, right? Or was it Tom Clancy?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the thing, was there was so much news around the deal with that book and his spats with publishers. I think he was dealing with a lot of ego issues at the time. And that's not a ding on him. I think he was struggling with the fact that people still saw him primarily as kind of a schlock writer, when by that point he had done tons of great shit and had great movies released. I mean, Shawshank, Stand By Me, but you know, they weren't putting his name on Shawshank when they were marketing it because they didn't want people to think it was a horror movie. So I think those were the kind of things he was bucking, and he wanted Bag of Bones to be, he called it like a literary gothic. He wanted people to take it, to see him as a non-horror writer and somebody who could write drama and romance really well, which is so funny because he's done it better in so many books than he does in Bag of Bones.
Like when he's not trying.
Book. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it's almost like when he's I think he could just get so overwrought with Bag of Bones. I know it's not Bag of Bones episode, but yeah, Jen, I think something like The Dead Zone has such thematic richness in it because he's probably not thinking about it. It's just coming from his subconscious.
Yeah.
Well, and like if I think about kind of the trajectory of this emergence of theme, I think like in starting around the 90s, like with Misery, and I'm probably forgetting big stuff, but it feels like he's exploring themes through like these really solitary character studies. Like I think about Misery and Dolores Claiborne and Gerald's Game and The Green Mile to a certain extent too, that
Rose Madder,
and Rose Madder, that feel really focused on one character and like, or one or two characters, I guess, with Misery, and kind of exploring themes through that lens, like really attached to a character's behavior. And it feels like he kind of, maybe with Bag of Bones, maybe that's the turning point of kind of expanding that. Actually, maybe it's Desperation and Regulators, where he expands that into like more exploring themes through the story with these like larger casts, you know?
Yeah, I feel like in my mind, like Desperation and Regulators were sort of him closing the door. It was like that segue sort of into the new thing. So it was, the falling out, as Randall was saying, with the Viking and moving to Scribner. And I think I said on the Bag of Bones episode, it's like with an athlete where, you know, you're the highest paid athlete, but you haven't won a championship. And at a certain point, you're like, what's my legacy going to be? You know, am I just going to be known as successful or as a champion? And I think Bag of Bones, it's almost worth going back once we finish this decade and looking at the two, because I really do think that's a huge turning point of him wanting to be, or at least attempting to be taken more serious as a writer.
Yep.
And which is very strange because maybe it's the collaborative nature of this, because I don't feel like this is a very, you know, highfalutin serious book at all.
No.
So it's just funny that it's coming, you know, on the heel of so many of these where, you know, I mean, you could even argue like Insomnia is very important, you know, Dolores Claiborne and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well,
and then Hearts in Atlantis
Hearts
was
in
a
Atlantis.
book where he really spilled a lot of blood on the page. And it's like, it's fascinating, but I feel like maybe he was a little exhausted and wanted to just like, that's why he kind of linked up with Peter again, because he just wanted to have fun. Because I think like after the sort of emotional toll of all of like the accumulation of all of this, he perhaps just wanted to relax a little bit. And I think this book feels that way, because as beautiful as the writing is in it, and it is purple prose occasionally, and it does really perhaps push the boundaries of I don't know, length and exhaustion. At the same time, it feels like it's being done in the spirit of, I want to impress the person, you know, but I want to impress Peter, or I want to impress Stephen. Like it's friends hanging out. And I feel like there's less pressure on this one. And I think that, you know, that period between Bag of Bones and Dreamcatcher, I think was one where I think he was really grappling with wanting to be taken seriously with these huge, weighty themes. And so I'm actually really curious, once we get past, like get to Everything's Eventual and past the Dark Tower, because, you know, we're going to be mainly rooted in the Dark Tower later. Like what kind of is the tenor and the tone and the themes at work with his post Dark Tower material, you know?
Yeah. And I really feel like that's closing out, like the fact that they came out in succession. I think he was kind of like, all right, I'm ready to move on from this. Let's just, you know, clear out what's on my computer hard drive.
Cool. All right. And then, so let's talk about some of the ideas here. I mean, as I wrote in my notes here, I said, I think this book's mostly disinterested in larger themes. It's more invested in place, in character, and honestly, the grotesque, I think, in really fun ways. But I think sort of the big one, Dan, you mentioned the notion of light versus dark. And is it a theme? Not really, but I think it does. It is sort of a motif in the book. Neil Gaiman described the book as Victorian, you know, kind of referencing that kind of Dickensian era of literature. And, you know, Dickensian, obviously Dickens is a huge influence on this book. They read the book Bleak House, you know, obviously very related to Black House within the book. And I think a lot of the artists are of that era that Henry and Jack are kind of bonding over. And, there's a lot to be said about Victorian literature, and I'm certainly not an expert, and I'm certainly not trying to categorize it as something that can be boiled down this simply. But I think some things that you can note about Victorian literature is that there is a notion of what's good and what's bad in that. There is not a ton of moral gray area.
There's
and
good
also,
guys and bad guys.
Yeah, there's good guys and bad
too.
guys. Yep. And then and it usually deals in omniscient narration that has a moral bent. It judges its characters and categorizes them as good and evil. And I think that is something we obviously very much see in the narration. The narration to me is almost what stands in where a lot of themes would be otherwise, because I think a lot of what is, makes this book singular in so many ways, and not just a horror story, is the narration. And I guess we can save that for structure and format, but yeah, I think it's suited to the fantasy origins too. I mean, I know fantasy is a complex genre, and I'm afraid to get yelled at by YA writers by saying this, but I think fantasy is primarily known for its good guys and bad guys. So Talisman is obviously that way. Morgan Sloat, just that name, Morgan Sloat and Talisman is one of the most comically evil characters he's ever created.
One, and it's interesting too, because I mean, you could argue that the Stand's primary themes, or at least its organizing principles, are good versus evil, light versus dark, etc. But the Stand dives so deep into that it shows the imperfections in both. Like when
lots
they go,
of gray area in there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, as much as I can't stand some of those meeting sequences, we start to see the imperfections of the Boulder Free Zone, and also why somewhere like Vegas would be appealing, not just because of as the miniseries would have you believe sex and strippers and whatever.
Men in suits with Uzis.
Yeah, and so you can use those as those broader themes as jumping off points to get into the nitty gritty. But yeah, I agree. I don't think Black House is super interested in that, and that's fine with me. I love just seeing that two dudes having fun together.
Well, and I think if I look at the Stand, I feel like the overarching theme there is that the corruption is inevitable. And here I think maybe what I see is more that the corruption is there underneath the surface everywhere. One of the my favorite sequences is the book is when Fred slowly admits to himself that Tyler is gone, and just this idea that we live in this idyllic town and none of these bad things can actually touch us. And I think people in the book are constantly reckoning with the fact that these things they always thought were for other people are actually affecting their lives and can actually be real for them.
Totally. Well, and even if you look at how the malevolent force in the book decides to possess these men, for the Crimson King's greater good, it's not like he's picking good people and corrupting them or something, right? It's let's take this thing that's
looking
already
for the sickos. Yeah,
it's already evil, and I'm just gonna make it more evil and more powerful. I completely agree. I think if anything, it's okay, the evil was all already there all along.
Yeah, there's some interesting choices to him who they put the evil on, because even the reporter, was it Wendell?
Oh, Wendell.
And he doesn't. He's portrayed as pretty much a total asshole, but it's and again, you wonder if this is King taking a shot at the press.
God forgive me, I hate critics.
I don't. I'm not a fan of making fun of journalism for their jobs. I know people criticize the media as this juggernaut, but that's such a vague term of what is media? What specifically are you talking about?
The MSM.
So to just have a journalist that is bloodthirsty and willing to cross all ethical boundaries, that's an odd choice for me to make him the bad guy. And I do too with the good. Choosing the bikers, because Stephen King's an avid motorcycle fan.
Oh yeah, he loves his big boys.
I can see him going to Sturgis and being this guy went to med school and then chose the biker life, and
he reads poetry. Okay, and so when did Sons of Anarchy come out? Because I could not read this without thinking about Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, it was
but it was
after
post this, right?
Yeah, I think Sons came out probably around 2009 or 2010, probably somewhere around there.
Is he on that at some point?
Yeah,
he's
he
in
has a
season
cameo.
3.
Is he?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
I hate. I'll save my
Bachman.
biker thoughts, but good God, man, love Stephen King, favorite author, favorite artist, but the biker shit just never. It drives me insane.
You just don't get it, Caffrey. You don't.
But they're sensitive. Can you believe it?
They went to college.
I have some very funny.
I know. I can't wait to get to them.
later,
I've been waiting years to talk about Beezer and the Thunder 5.
Yep, I was thinking Sons of Anarchy, and what is Dan thinking while he's reading this?
I actually like them more this time. They were not as silly as I remember them being. But anyway, we'll get there.
So I don't know. I guess like we've kind of touched on this, but I think for me, I guess I'll just kick this off by saying, you know, I asked, do you enjoy this moral clarity that is provided in this book? And you know, I guess the way I see it is that in stories like this, the bad guys can lack, like, it's fine for bad guys to lack complexity because then they're allowed to be extra evil. And I love super duper evil characters like Charles Burnside in this. And but then does that same lack of complexity benefit the good guys as well? And I guess that's where I struggle, because I'm by and large mostly disinterested in the good guys in this, whereas I love spending time with characters like Burnside, with Chipper, you know, like characters like that, and then Wendell, who I thought was a lot of fun. Like, those are the characters that I have more fun spending time with in this book. Whereas, and I think the writers do too, like King and Peter Straub. And whereas Jack, for me, and we can touch on this more in Heroes and Villains, but these are characters who are so noble and so respected and good at everything that there's something a little bit annoying about it. Like, I can see why so many writers fall back on the like detective who's also an alcoholic kind of trope, because if you have to like have your book like be like a good cop, you have to give him something that gives him a little bit of darkness, a little bit of weakness. So, and I think alcoholism for a detective or something like that is like a very easy one to fall back on that's usually effective. The thing about Jack in this is that his only sin is that he has forgotten this supernatural experience he had when he was 12.
I was gonna say, I kept thinking of Lost every time his name came on, and I gotta say, I wanted more Sawyer, less Jack.
That is a great way to put it.
That's yeah. Although Jack's the alcoholic in Lost, right? I can't remember.
In later seasons,
he becomes an OxyContin addict, but
that's right. Post the island,
evil,
right?
Though, even I don't consider addiction evil.
Look, I think drug addicts are fucking evil. No, I'm just kidding. I swear to God, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I have a lot of addiction issues in my family. I promise.
So,
sounds like an evil family.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys like? What do you guys make of that? Is that like, did you find yourselves more drawn to the good guys or the bad guys?
Oh, bad guys, like hands down. And I think, well, know what it is. And you mentioned that we talked about, you know, Desperation a lot, which is, I don't hate that book as much as a lot of people, but it's not my favorite King book. And I think when King, there are great parts of that book, but when King tries to grapple with the greater thematic implications of that book, I think he fumbles really badly, especially at the end. And I'm not saying King can't do that. Like, he does that really well. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think the book understands what it is, Black House. You know what I mean? And in a way that maybe some of his other books that reach for the stars a little bit more as far as theme goes don't. And so my thing is like, okay, if they know what they're trying to do here, which is just a pure genre exercise, then yeah, I want my bad guys to be bad. and then it's fine if the good guys are good and just good at everything. I mean, there does become a nexus where the good guys being so good at everything does become kind of funny. Like even at the end, there's a moment where well, I was gonna say spoiler alert, but everyone listening has read the book, obviously, where Jack gets shot, and I forget which of the bikers is, Doc or someone. Like, they say he like stage dives on top of the woman they shoot on Wanda or whatever, and you're just like, what are these guys? Like, there's they have no faults or anything. And so so I'm much more drawn to the bad guys in general, and I just think I don't know. I think with bad guys, you can fall back on grotesqueries and visually interesting things in a way that you really can't with good guys. Like that scene where Burnside like takes out his dick and pretends to piss on the woman's head and then puts it away. Like it's so unnecessary. You don't have to do it, but it's also so gross and funny. And just, I like that they're just trying to one up each other, King and Straub. Whereas I don't know, if you had Jack do something like that, or even if it was like Jack walking around his apartment farting, that like you can't do that with them. You like almost don't have permission to go gross with them if you're doing a purely binary good and evil tale. Like I don't know why it just doesn't work like that. I mean, maybe it would be kind of funny if Jack was just picking his nose all the time or something. But I just don't think you can do that.
Yeah, his one thing is he can't stop picking his ass, you know. But no, I love what you just said about like pulling his dick out. Like, he doesn't need to do that. And it's kind of like later when he's going to Chipper's office with the fucking garden shears, and then the woman at the desk like talks to him, and he's like, and he ignores her and keeps going, and he's like, I'll let her be. But then she keeps talking to him, and he's like, all right, I'll fucking cut her head off. It's like totally unnecessary, but at the same time, like I do genuinely get the feeling that a lot of what's happening with these characters, a lot of the kind of perhaps gratuitous profanity and grotesquerie is really like them trying to make each other laugh or trying to like, you know, make the other one giggle, make the other one retch a little bit. And then I saw this in a review somewhere and I agreed, which is that I think that one of the things they also probably took pleasure in was trying to confuse the people who are trying to figure out who wrote what. Like they say that all the like Peter Straub apparently loves to mention jazz in his books and obscure jazz artists. And there's a scene, I believe Jack like likes jazz. And so they were like, I wouldn't be surprised if King wrote that to sort of trip people up.
Oh, that's
and
funny.
or like the scenes when, and like Straub even said in an interview, he's like, you know, King loves to use italics and he loves to use all caps. So he goes, so I started doing that in my sections. I started using italics and that. So I think that they were very interested in playing with style and trying to take the other person's style, make it their own, and vice versa. So I think that they were a lot more concerned with that than they were with, you know, kind of trying to spin out a unified theme. I think that this book was, to me, an exercise in friendship and like good and, you know, silliness amongst friends than anything. And I kind of love that. It makes me appreciate the book even more.
Yeah, and I think that's what stands out to me. Like I was thinking, I found the bad guys very off-putting, especially with all the gross stuff. Like it was entertaining, I guess, but not particularly for me. I did enjoy Wendell Green, but I was just kind of bored with Jack. But I was fascinated by the periphery of everybody. You know, like it reminded me of Salem's Lot in a lot of ways, where like the town kind of becomes a character. Like I enjoyed the I know we're going to talk about the narrative style, but like I enjoyed like kind of going around the county and just kind of catching up with people. I really enjoyed Dale and Fred and just kind of them trying to grapple with what's happening to them. And
normal
so that
dudes.
was
Yeah.
exactly. And so I guess what I hadn't really thought about it on those terms, but yeah, I think you're right. They were more interested in like the writing of it than they really were the characters, which is unusual for a King book. But it allowed me, like I felt, as long as this was, and there were definitely points where I was like, come on, what
Move
are we
it
doing
along,
now?
boys.
You know, but I also, it was relaxing in a way because I didn't feel like I was constantly having to like assign a moral idea to any character, especially knowing we were going to be talking about it. You know, I could kind of just let the story kind of wash over me. And I found that really relaxing and enjoyable.
Yeah.
I thought it's even just funny, the idea of him pulling his dick out and almost peeing, because that's like what little boys do. Like in elementary school I had a tree fort and we would see who can climb the highest and then pee off the tree. And I see this as like Stephen and Peter being like, oh, should I pee, you know?
Absolutely.
And like I mean I agree with Caffrey. Like I'm drawn to the bad guys in the majority of narratives just because they're so much more fun. And I just have a little quote, and this isn't for Randall too, but a famous bad guy once said, hard work pays off, dreams come true, bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
Is that Razor
Scott
Ramon?
Hall.
Yeah,
Razor
rest in
Ramon, who
peace.
just passed away
nice.
recently. But I've always loved that quote.
Yeah.
And it's been, you know, making its rounds on social media in the past few months. So R.I.P. Long live the bad guy.
Speaking of bad guys, one other little thread I just want to pull here, which I thought was interesting and kind of a bold move, was obviously Burnside is heavily inspired by Albert Fish, the serial killer, who basically, hold on, let me bring up just the basic facts here. I mean, if you really want to
murderer,
if you just want to disturb
masochist.
the hell out of yourself,
I read a play called Albert Fish's Children. That's I didn't finish it, but it was and it was because he had kids that he he weirdly didn't abuse his own children, which I guess is good. But
you know what, shit where you eat, you know.
Yeah, no, for real. But yeah, he would. I mean, all those letters that he sends in Black House, I mean, it's word for word where Albert Fisher and something. I read some of his letters, and this is so disturbing to me. He called like little boys' testicles peewees, and he called like the penis the monkey. Just really foul. Just I hate he definitely had a style in his writing. I'm not saying that to like praise his writing, but he had this thing to kind of glom onto for Black House, and he would insert needles into his groin. And you can look up X-rays of him online. You actually went from when he died, and you can actually see all like hundreds of needles like inside him when he died. I mean, that's not even the worst shit he did. I mean, obviously, obviously the child murdering.
He was hoping they would amplify in the electric chair and give him more pain.
Yeah, just like sick shit. And I think because there's so many first person letters that he wrote to victims' families and to law enforcement to taunt them, he has a voice in a way that a lot of other serial killers don't. And so yeah, man, it's out there if you want to read those letters. Anyway, I read all.
New York Times best-selling author Albert Fish.
Seriously.
No, he was So he was a serial killer, rapist, child molester, cannibal. And, I was doing some just basic research. I mean, this is real stomach churning stuff, but, he said I can sort of see what drew King and Straub to him, which was, he used to say that he felt like God was commanding him to torture and sexually mutilate children, which is pretty fucked up. And a guy like that, you never know how much of it was mental illness and how much of it was just he was pure evil. They say he was suffering from psychosis, and I certainly don't doubt that. There was apparently a history of mental illness in his family, but it's really twisted. And yeah, like you said, Dan, like some of the language in the letters used in Black House is exactly like what Albert Fish would write. And I guess, how do we feel about King taking this real life murderer? And because he basically insinuates that Mr. Munchin, who has possessed Burnside in this story, previously used to possess Albert Fish, and Albert Fish was recruiting children for End World in the same way that Burnside is doing, and that this is something he's been doing. Like, I guess when you take a real world killer like that, and I mean, the thing is, King is never shy about naming that which inspired him. He'll always say, hey, this is just like the Blair Witch Project, or this is just like Independence Day. Like we talked about that in our Dreamcatcher episode, but it's like, Albert Fish is such a pronounced character in the fabric of this book. I don't know. How did you guys feel about that?
This is normally the kind of thing that would really bother me, because I've talked a lot on psychoanalysis about being really sensitive to true crime, because, he uses the victims' actual names in the book too. Yeah. Like Grace Budd is one of his victims. And I can't remember if he actually uses the mother's name, but these are people that really existed, and they really suffered these atrocious things. And I don't feel like King is really exploiting that in any way. I also feel like this was maybe early 1900s. I want to say it was long time ago.
Yeah,
1920s.
Yeah, I think Albert Fish died in the 30s.
32.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to say I give it a pass, but I feel like it feels less immediate than if Scott Peterson were a major character in a book,
Yeah, I agree with Jen. I mean, and I'm not someone, admittedly, who is super sensitive to this kind of thing. However, I think it would be in pretty poor taste if anyone was alive still that would be affected. I mean, the parents of all these kids, I think, would be dead by that point. As would maybe they're. Well, I don't know. I mean, they wouldn't have had kids because they were kids and they got murdered. I mean, I guess there are probably people who you could trace their bloodline back to Albert Fish's victims, but yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt anyone to the point where they're like, oh my God, that's my parent or my kid you're exploiting. So yeah, I mean, to me, and I think he's definitely not, I don't know, it's kind of like Albert Fish also. I don't know how you would, there's nothing to honor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so awful that to me, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Connect it to all this weird midworld shit. And cause also, I also think because the book isn't saying that, oh, Albert Fish wasn't a sicko, he was just possessed by this thing. He's still saying, no, this dude was a sicko, and then this thing, it was kind of a perfect marriage.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think he's still at least recognizing the fact that no, this is a real guy who probably would have done horrible things regardless. Because isn't there a line about Munchin is like, oh well, I'll take the ones that are going to be valuable to the Crimson King, but you can kill as many as you like. Yeah, exactly. So I think in a weird way that kind of still roots it in reality. Anyway, I don't know what y'all want to add.
It feels like him explain kind of in the way that he puts Lee Harvey Oswald in 11/26/63 and in lots of other things. It feels like him kind of trying to process how this much evil can exist in one person, you know? So maybe if that is part of the theme, I don't know, I could see that.
I read an article recently that was very interesting on the Eternals, which was not interesting, but there's implications for like Hiroshima and Nagasaki in that movie. And then you're like, well, wait,
yeah,
if that's connected to that, does over time that take away from the reality? Does that create trouble to bear witness to actual tragedy? Then you have conversely, like The Watchmen, which brought up the Tulsa race massacre, which I was not even aware of. And then you're like, well, that actually maybe exposed more awareness to that thing happening. And there's definitely ethics, but I would also not want to hinder a writer and be like, you can't write about that.
Sure.
But I do think like when you're diminishing, when you're like, well, he was actually possessed, and kind of the Scott Peterson thing, is it temporal? Is it because this happened 100 years ago, we can talk about it a little more freely? Whereas if it's a little too contemporary, does that start to affect people? Because I like it when comics and narrative would use real life events, but now it's getting done so often. It's almost like you can, I would joke that if you go to a bookstore, like half the books have like swastikas on the cover because it elicits such a powerful emotion. Yeah. So even if the book sucks, when you see it, you're like, oh, this is like a little edgy. And, you don't want to go to that well too often. And I feel like that's kind of what's been happening, I don't know, in the past 10, 15 years. I don't think Albert Fish
from the headlines.
Yeah, I don't think Albert Fish is. I mean, if you're like us and you're kind of dark, I have serial killer art in my house, for example. I'm like, there's some ethics with that. But I don't think Albert Fish is, the shining example of that being a problem. But I do see a lot of cheaper scares coming from that sort of material.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's just an interesting question. And it was something I found kind of, I think when I first read the book, I didn't know who Albert Fish was and probably thought he was just a fictional character. So then, now having known who he is, it was striking to stumble upon his name so many times in this book. So, but yeah, let's pivot over and talk about the Dark Tower. I feel like it's important to talk about here since this is such an important Dark Tower tome. Like, I guess, what is it in the broader thing? Like, what did we learn about Midworld and the Dark Tower universe here that we didn't know before? What is like the new information that came through? Like Flieger, I know that you already knew a lot of this stuff and you had read the other books first, but for somebody I think who hadn't read them, what gets introduced here that is new information?
Yeah, I was gonna say because it's so hard. Well, no, it's so hard to parse out because I try to remember what because where I was talking about the Dark Tower and like what came out already. Yeah, no, Flieger. I mean, I guess Breakers we learned about in Hearts in Atlantis, and then Little Sisters of Illyria has not come out yet.
Not out
yet.
Yeah.
Everything's eventual. Yeah.
Although they're referenced in this story because he had clearly written the story by that point. Because when they are in the tent with Wendell and everything in the middle part of the book, they mention that
it kind of spoils the
it kind of gives
story.
Away the basic like outline of the story of
because it spoiled it because he literally says other vampires. Like it's spoiled.
They're nurses who keep you alive and feed on you.
Yeah, suck your blood. Yeah.
I was gonna say the thunder drawing the second word is like that. Not the is it Thunderlands?
Thunderbolt.
Thunderclap.
Thunderclap. Thunderclap's Wolves of the Cow. But in this they talk about like in the industrial lands. I think they just kind of flesh out a little bit more of like the midworld, outworld, just some more of the lands that are there without getting too into. I don't know. They just kind of add a little more color, but it's not even like stuff from like the main story. Well, I thought like this actually tied more to like the Institute with some of that stuff. But.
And do you guys think? Because I'm trying to remember, they had revised the Talisman by this point, right? Because Talisman originally was not about Midworld; it was just some other dimension. I don't know if they revised Talisman. I think that's interesting because.
I think that what they did, like, it's so funny because I guess I always assumed that they call it the territories in the Talisman. And apparently back then it wasn't meant to be related to the Dark Tower world at all. But then that's something that I guess I'd always assumed that it was sort of a retcon, but it actually says it in this book. There is a moment where Jack says, oh, the territories are different than Midworld/Endworld. That is a different universe. I always thought it was the same. And obviously they go to the territories or another version of it with Parkus later, because they mentioned the Little Sisters of Illyria and the tent where Jack saw his mother like dying or whatever in the Talisman. And so I think it gets a little bit gummy.
Yeah, you're right. No, I'm looking up. Yeah, I always thought they went back and revised the Talisman. I guess that So maybe that's the function of it. Then is just kind of retconning it, and whether he knew it or not, preparing us for how everything was going to be connected by the Dark Tower in a few books. That's really strange. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of emphasis here. I think one of the things that they hammer home is the notion that there are multiple worlds, and that when all these children are freed at the end, there's all this talk about how they're going to their different portals or whatever, because they're all from different universes, which is super interesting.
It gets so in the weeds, man.
It gets really in the weeds, and that's starting to happen. But the scene with Parkis and Sophie, when they cross over in the hospital, that's when a lot of this information starts to come out. Like Parkis basically gets this exposition dump monologue where he's like, let me start to connect some dots, because by this point we know that there's multiple worlds, and we know that that there is the beam breakers and stuff like that. And then in Hearts in Atlantis, we meet Ted, who we learn is somebody who is capable of destroying the beams that are holding up the tower. And we know that, there are these agents and they are related to the Crimson King. And we know that the Crimson King is sort of this big bad, but we kind of at that point didn't know much else. What we learn here is basically between pages, in my book, at least 587 and like 595, there's all this talk about the Crimson King is like, this two-sided figure who is the Crimson King, but also Ram Abala. And Parkis says his physical being is pent in a cell at the top of the tower, but he has another manifestation every bit as real, and this lives in Kanta Abala, the court of the Crimson King. And he says, if he or it destroys the tower, this is what Jack says, won't that defeat his purpose? Won't he destroy his physical being in the process? Parkis says just the opposite. He'll set it free to wander what will then be chaos. Dinta, the furnace. Some parts of Midworld have fallen into that furnace already. So that Dinta is sort of the apocalypse that they're talking about here. And then Parkis also elaborates a bit on what breakers are. He says rational beings have always harbored telepaths among their number. That's true in all worlds, but they're ordinarily rare creatures, prodigies, you might say. But since the age of poison thought came on your world, Jack, it infested it like a demon. Such beings have become much more common. Not as common as slow mutants in the blasted lands, but common, yes. And they talk about mind readers. They talk about precognates, teleports. And this is where King is sort of, I think, taking the idea of The Shining, folding it into the Dark Tower kind of world. He says, world jumpers like old traveling Jack here, in other words, about teleports. And then he says telekinetics. Mind readers are the most common, telekinetics the rarest and the most valuable to the Crimson King. And then he says, over the last 200 years or so, the Abala has spent a good part of his time gathering a crew of telepathic slaves. Most of them come from Earth and the territories. All of the telekinetics come from Earth. This collection of slaves, this gulag, is his crowning achievement. We call them breakers. So yeah, there's a lot here to kind of absorb, but then he keeps going. He says that, of the 6 beams, only 1 still holds true. 2 others still generate some holding power. The other 3 are dead. One of these went out thousands of years ago. In the ordinary course of things, the others were killed by breakers. He says the job of protecting the tower and the beams has always belonged to the ancient war guild of Gilead, called gunslingers in this world and many others. They also generated a powerful psychic force, one fully capable of countering the Crimson King's breakers, but they're all gone except for one. Well, that's what Sophie says. He says, no, but there's more than one. Roland, and they mention Roland by name. They say he has made at least 3 others. I've no idea how that can be possible, but I believe it to be true. If Roland were still alone, the breakers would have toppled the tower long since. But with the force of these others, the world's been able to keep persevering. And so kind of the final little bit here, well, there's a few other things. It's all very convoluted, but they basically say Tyler, the kidnapped boy in this, he is not only a telekinetic, strong, powerful breaker, but perhaps the greatest breaker of all time, just like how Jack is the greatest detective of all time.
But he's the second, or he's one of 2 greatest breakers, right? Doesn't it say there's another one?
They say Tyler Marshall is potentially one of the 2 most powerful breakers in all the history of the worlds. And the other one's what? Probably Patrick Danville?
That's what I was thinking. That's Insomnia? The little boy. And yeah.
So,
let me just
go ahead
too. So it was the furnace lands. That's the phrase I was trying to, not thunder lands.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then also, adding to that, so like I think like when he questions like what the Crimson King wants, there's like I think some connection to like the Todash, like sort of like there are places that exist between worlds, but I don't know how fleshed out it was by the time they were writing this. So I don't know that they had, I see a lot of this stuff is kind of just like skeleton for like the remaining Dark Tower books. So I think he kind of like put the idea of the breakers out there and maybe was like, you know what, that's actually, let's dig further down into that. And then we could save it for later, but I'd like to talk about the character Parkus too, and sort of his connections when we do the characters.
Yeah. So this book seems to me, it really exists to set up the adversary, right? Like, who is it that Roland, like, we've learned about the Crimson King. There's been mention of him in Wizard and Glass, and obviously in Insomnia and in Hearts and Atlantis. We keep hearing this name. I remember reading this book, and this was the closest I started to come to being like, okay, who is this character? Because it's been so, and I think King probably didn't even know to some degree. Like, I know this is my big bad, but I don't really know what he is yet. And this book, I think, sort of exists to show, okay, I still don't really know what the Crimson King is, but I'm starting to figure out who his henchmen are and who is, how he's using these breakers, what he's doing. And like you said, Jen, this is really a tease for, okay, this is who Roland's up against once we get into Wolves of the Kella and so on and so forth. So lots of lore here, which is very dizzying, as that's why I wanted to read some of those sections. And I only read like a quarter of what's all there. And then obviously when they go into the Furnace Lands, not you wouldn't say that this was the furnace at the end. That's like, they call it End World, right?
Well, it's like Furnace Lands within End World. Think of like States of America.
Gotcha. Yeah. So and then we see all these children, it reminds me of like Simpsons version of hell, like kids in rags, like pushing giant machinery, being whipped by green demons and stuff. So
right next to the ironic
so funny
punishment department.
Because I thought of like the Futurama, the devil episode for his character, just from the way they described his body. So
so it's wild, man. And then just seeing a character like Mr. Munchin, I think is
Joe Biden. It's wild, man. I
got hairy legs. So it's like, it is interesting to see Mr. Munchin, who is basically, a very obviously powerful character here, but we sort of witness how people from our world can, take on and defeat these sort of middle managers in Black House. Munchin strikes me as a sort of middle manager of Midworld, which is kind of a fun way to put it. But I think it's this whole book, we talked about good versus evil. This book seems very interested in fleshing out the evil that exists within the Dark Tower universe. So, there's a lot there, and I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit more. Like you said, Dan, we're going to talk about Parkus and heroes and villains a little bit. But anything else you guys want to talk about in the hook, or should we pop on over to structure and format?
Look at me. Look at me, teacher.
Okay, so structure and format, sometimes we don't have a lot to talk about in this section because, it's boring. It's totally boring. But here we get to talk about the narration, which I think is really key to this book. And we've mentioned it a few times, but I'm just genuinely kind of fascinated by the tone of it all. Like a lot of people talk in our Discord and elsewhere, a lot of people talk about the first 150 pages of this, which sort of consists of these floating cinematic transitions that feel, and then we find out later that it's confirmed that basically they've been hitching a ride with Gorg the Crow, who is an evil entity, but it's all, they mention the idea of flying and roosting and camping out on poles and stuff like that. So they treat, exploring French Landing, where this whole book takes place, they explore it from the sky. And I don't know, I think it's interesting but divisive. I've also seen people defend it and say it's really beautifully written and they really love it, and I've seen other people say it's annoying, get on with the story, what's with all this bullshit description. So I guess I want to hear from you guys. How did you feel? Because there is sort of a marked tone shift once we get into the actual kidnapping of Tyler Marshall, where it begins. And that's kind of what that AV Club review I mentioned, read earlier mentioned, which was that the narration becomes a bit more straightforward once we hit part 2 of the book. So how did you guys feel about those first 150 pages? Did you find them daunting? Did you find them annoying? Or did they really pull you in?
They pulled me in. And honestly, I think part of it, what it is for me, is because not that King hasn't set books outside of Maine before, but reading a book so heavily in a state like Wisconsin, which is much different than the locales we usually see King talk about, I love that there's this bit of hand-holding getting us into there. Like, I just think it's such a different community than King usually writes about, that I love just getting to know it. And I know that Straub said it's hard to tell where he ends and King begins and vice versa. But I guess as I was reading it, to me, it just felt very Straubian, like the way the town is being described, that kind of poetic interconnectedness of everything, that just felt like Peter Straub. So for me, it just signals that Black House is a little bit different. It almost like welcomes him back into the fold. And also, too, because I'm assuming most of these Wisconsin details are coming from Straub because he grew up here. I almost love that we get this different narrative device than King, from what King usually uses, just because it's a different kind of book. And I don't know, it feels very sweeping and enchanting. It makes me love this town that's not Derry or Castle Rock or Ludlow or whatever else. And I think that's kind of key to this book. I will say, I mean, it goes on a little bit long in that first opening stretch. I think Randall was texting how it does take a little bit for the book to get going, and I think that's because there's so much table setting in the first 150, even 200 pages. But yeah, I'm really into it overall, and I like how they do it again when we get to see the Black House. Like, we get this kind of tour of the Black House, and even when we go into the territory / midworld, whatever you want to call it, it stays fairly consistent throughout, and it's interesting to see that device applied to various different environments, not just Wisconsin. So I am team omniscience. I will say.
How about you guys, Jen?
I loved it too. I was really into it. And this is, I think, where the connection to Salem's Lot kind of sprung into my mind, because it feels very much like the morning in that book, where we're going through all of these different characters waking up and going through their morning routines. And I feel like there is like the amount of really upsetting stuff that happens earlier, like just the description of Irma Furneaux's body and just like the disgusting nature of Charles Burnside. Like, I enjoy having a bit of hand holding with it. And I love the moment when he was like, we're going to leave this because we need a break. You know, I feel like there's someone on my side as I'm reading this really upsetting stuff. And I think it is a really just interesting introduction to this town. Also, I think it's really well written, and so I really enjoyed just kind of flowing along with it, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be the dissenter, I guess, for this one. Because it's like that meta narrative. Like, I've seen this done before, but I think so. Kurt Vonnegut does a very similar narration in Breakfast of Champions, where he's sort of floating omniscient narrator.
Yeah, that's true.
He later encounters the characters as Kurt Vonnegut, which is hilarious. Which Cy King might have lifted a little bit. I didn't hate it. I just didn't really enjoy it. It reminded me of like the intro of kind of like a cheesy horror movie where it's like, we join our characters unsuspecting as they were, you know, and then like that. Okay, we'll come back to you a little bit later. So there was some stuff that I liked, but toward the end too, there's a thing that's like, but don't get excited yet for Jack because it's not going to have a happy. And I was just like,
oh, I loved that part.
Yeah, we talk about that little foreshadowing thing that King does like
I
a
don't
lot.
mind
Sometimes
it.
it works, and sometimes
it happens in the Dark Tower, but I just didn't.
Well, yeah,
yeah, I know. And that's the thing is like, so I think it's kind of a hit or miss thing. Like when it works very well for me, but I don't know that it was consistent throughout. It felt like it was happening a lot more at the beginning and the end of the book, and in the middle, I guess I almost like forgot it was happening until it started really coming back strong.
yeah.
Well, let me say this. I think the difference, because King loves to do the foreshadowing. Sometimes we love it. The difference here is the tone.
Yeah.
And because there is this sort of self-awareness bordering on obnoxiousness that I think is intentional to some degree in the tone of the narration, but it also shifts sometimes in ways that feel a little bit contradictory to me. Jen, you had said you feel like they're on your side.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I felt that way, and sometimes I felt like they weren't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I felt like there was an antagonistic quality to the narration.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about that more, but you were going to say something before I jumped in. What was that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I also like the connection to Sons of Anarchy really jumped out to me too, because especially in later seasons, like he would end every episode, it seems, with this like 70-minute song that just like pans through where all of the characters are. And that scene where I think it happens like about midway through where Beezer is trying to decide if he's going to go like score some drugs or whatever. And that I was like, that is so Sons of Anarchy. That is what they do.
Yeah.
So that I did find it a little obnoxious in that way. But the thing that I really loved about that last little chunk of like, you could choose to end it here or you could choose to go on, which is, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but that is definitely something we'll see again. And I loved it there too, because like, the thing that I love about King's writing, and the thing I think he gets shit on when people talk about his endings, is that the more I read of his work, I really don't think there are happy and sad endings. I think the story just continues, and it's where you choose to end it. And if you choose to end it when everyone is happy, then it's a happy ending. And if you choose to go a little further, or you choose to end it like right after they rescue Tyler and you don't get that catharsis of freeing all the children, then it's maybe not so happy. And I just love that the story continues. And especially with a book like this, where it has been, I mean, I don't know how many years since the first chapter, it feels like a fitting into this book that there is more, and that there maybe always will be more, you know?
Yeah. And going on that too, I think like, and tying it back to what Randall was saying, I think sometimes it's the tone that really can set it. Because it's something of like a character, just something Stephen King might say of like, you know, he's sat his chair and enjoyed a beer. It would be his last. That sort of foreshadowing. Like I like that, where it's like,
I love it. Yeah. No one in the free zone never saw Sue again.
Yeah. Like, you know, it was their final kiss. Neither knew it. Something like that. But I'm glad these are resonating with you guys. But because you're right though. The Dark Tower from a very high end has something similar, and I actually didn't mind that one as much. And it ties back to your theme, Jen, of saying like it's happy if it ends at a happy place, but the story does go on. And I know, like, speaking from Caffrey and I are big Game of Thrones fans, and you know they didn't stick the last season, but to me that doesn't diminish the stuff that came before it. And I compare it even to like an SNL sketch. Like some of my favorite sketches have horrible endings. It's just when something has an exceptional ending, you remember it as like, wow, that really elevated everything that came before it. But I don't think it doesn't like tear down the stuff that preceded it in my mind.
Yeah. What's interesting is as we talk about all of this, and Randall, I'm thinking back about the criticism that you were reading, there wasn't really anything I could fault or say, no, that's wrong. Like it's just about style. And I think it is competently and well written. It's just whether or not you like it or whether or not it works for you. And I think it's really fascinating to see what kind of resonates with us, given that I don't think any of the writing is particularly bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll just say that, okay, so I have two sections I'm going to read here, and there's something almost contradictory about them, but I think that there's stuff to be mined from that. And this is where it comes back to the Victorian notion, where the omniscient narrators also have sort of a moral stake in what's happening here, and they are commenting on what's happening here. So like there's not there's a distance, like sometimes there's this like bemused distance that they adopt. Other times they're engaging emotionally with what's happening. And other times they're laughing at what's happening, like even really horrible shit. So page on 282 of this, it's when Jack is sort of engaging with Tyler's lost sneaker. And this is what it reads. It says, as he looks down at the sneaker, surrounded by its pitiful little cloud of stink, the smile fades. He feels some of the tremendous mystery we felt when we first came upon Irma in the wreckage of the abandoned restaurant. He will do his absolute best to honor this remnant, just as we did our best to honor the child. He thinks of autopsies he has attended, of the true solemnity that lurks behind the jokes and butcher shop crudities. So that notion where the authors step in and say, like, when we discussed Irma's body earlier, we tried to engage with it in a respectful way, right? Like that's the authors addressing themselves, saying, we're writing about a dead child. We were trying to be respectful of that. But then like, and I'm not saying that I don't enjoy this tension that exists between this and what I'm about to read. I just find it interesting. So about 18 pages later, we're doing another sort of bird-like sweep throughout the town. And it reads, "Let us flutter onto the telephone line just across from this track. Hot gossip tickles our birdie feet. Paula Habrowski's friend Myrtle Harrington passing on the news of the dead body or bodies at Ed's to Richie Bumstead, who will in turn pass it on to Beezer St. Pierre, grieving father and spiritual leader of the Thunder Five. This passage of voices through the wire probably shouldn't please us, but it does. Gossip is no doubt nasty stuff, but it does energize the human spirit." So we get a completely different tone there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not the same as a dead child, but it is the discovery of a dead child's body. But it's a more tawdry thing, which is gossip. And what ends up fueling kind of a catastrophe. And they're reveling in the fueling of that catastrophe, perhaps because it is a fun thing to write or it fuels the story and they're excited about that. And that's very different than writing about a dead child, which is not fun. So I think that there is this like willingness to acknowledge that, you know, this is Stephen King and this is Peter Straub writing this stuff. And they're either writing it with a certain amount of solemnity or they are writing it with a certain amount of giddiness. And I find that super interesting. I can't think of other books where I've seen that.
But I think also that's where the cracks show, because you have two different writers. It's very hard to maintain a narration, whether it's omniscient, omnipresent. So having two different people come in, those little differences you're going to start to notice. So I think that's maybe explains some of the inconsistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could also kind of look at it maybe as like the chorus, you know, or the Greek chorus.
Yeah, that's a good
kind
point.
or like the audience, you know, like this is how we are responding, because a lot of it feels very present tense. It feels like the floating camera that we would be watching. So if I were just kind of narrating to a blind man, maybe what was happening.
A blind man named Henry.
A blind man named Henry. Yeah, man. I mean,
the most. Yeah.
With the audiobook, just even a blind man can see. Just the way he says that over and over again, just is stuck in my brain right now. So, I don't know, but
page 398, we get this. They're talking about Burnside, and he's I believe like it's when he disappears in the stall. He like transports his way out. Should we look for him? Maybe we should. Maybe not knowing exactly maybe not knowing exactly where that rascal is makes us uneasy. And like, it's that tone that I think is funky and weird. Like,
yeah,
this is a man who rapes and murders children. And they're like, that rascal, you know what I mean? And I think that's because, again, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying it's interesting because I think they enjoy writing that character and they do see him, you know, as a fictional character. So they call him a rascal, you know what I mean? And then, the last thing I want to touch on, and I think you guys will probably will have noticed this, and I find it almost obnoxious and it almost pisses me off, but later in the book, page 435 in my edition, part-time officers Holtz and Nelser pull in behind the car bearing Gilbertson, Lund, Dulac, and Potter. We don't care much about Holtz and Nestor. Next in line is Jeff Festerson and Cheda, with Railsback and Morton Fine in the back seat. Morty is complaining about the lack of knee room. We care about Railsback, but he can wait. Next into the lot. You know, it's this like goofy sort of sense where they're like, okay, we have all this story to tell. We're not going to worry about this right now. We're going to do this. It's all the stuff that like that writers don't actually write, but you're thinking to a certain degree, and they're just throwing it in there. And I think to make each other laugh, you know, I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And the last one,
there's even a moment when he says, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just say the last one I'm going to read, and I think it'll relate to what you're saying, Jen, is near the end of the book when they all come out of the Black House, and it says, still they are safe, and our guys are safe too. All of them came back in one piece from the other side, and surely we did not expect that. Most quests of this type usually demand at least one sacrifice. A relatively minor character like Doc, for instance.
I know. It's like, ouch, tough hit to Doc.
It's just super funny to me where they look back and they're just like, yeah, we're writing a story and we're kind of, you know, breaking our rules a little bit. You know, there is a part of it that to me is obnoxious. That doesn't mean I hate it, but I kind of find it. And this is where I think that AV Club review, what that was getting at is like, these are guys, and some people see it as an example of how I was reading in another review about how confident they are as writers, that they feel confident sort of being themselves, commenting on their own story. And I guess, again, that is a matter
others might say hubristic, but
yeah. And I think like, I guess I'm just curious what your guys' take on all this stuff is.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it kind of took the edge off because I was upset by a lot of the things that happen in this because it is about a child murder.
Nasty. Yeah.
It's really, and it's really upsetting. And so I enjoyed kind of those moments of kind of cheekiness, just taking the edge off. And my favorite one is on page 457 when he says, "It would have been impolite to break away while Jack was meeting the love of his life, not to mention bad narrative business. So we didn't." It was like whoever is just commenting on the other one writing it,
Yeah. And I know Caffrey and I, we view a lot of pop culture through the lens of Simpsons and Sopranos. But there's an episode of The Simpsons, it's like Lord of the Flies, where they crash on an island. And at the end, the voiceover is like, so the children learned to function as a society. And eventually they were rescued by, let's say Mo. And
right.
Where,
But isn't it James Earl Jones also like doing that? They got someone really high end. No, that's what I was going to say. It almost feels like it's like their riff on like a Frank Capra movie, or like they're making fun of that a little bit, like the folksy. Like we always accuse King of maybe being a little bit too folksy, but here I think he is being self-aware and having some fun with that,
And that's where the lightness that we keep talking about comes from. That's where the silliness comes from. So again, I have an issue with it at times, but then at the same time, I think it does its job in, like you said, Jen, taking the edge off and reminding people, I guess, that for all the horrors of this, these are just two guys telling a story. Like it's really not about the larger themes. It's not about life and death and faith and sobriety and all the things that King loves to write about. He's like, we're having fun with this one,
And do you feel like it escalates in that kind of tone throughout the book, which I kind of feel, they're just kind of seeing how far they can take it, you know, like one-upping each other.
And this ties a little bit. This is, I guess, more the characters and the structure, and I put this more on King than Straub, but there are definitely there's a lot of bureaucracy in this book where there's a character like when he's checking into the hospital and there's like the page at the front desk is like, well, I can't let you in. And I'm like, are we really going to do 4 or 5 pages now of them going back and forth? And I know eventually that character lets.
He pays off a little bit, but I agree with you.
He has to serve function. But as I was reading it, I'm just like, this guy is going to, block him from advancing the story. And that's where I could see Straub being like, King, can we just, there were a few instances of that where I'm like, you could have trimmed out some of the fat there.
Yeah.
The 3-page description of how cool Henry's outfit is. I was screaming
like that.
into the book.
Henry, man. Oh God.
We'll talk about him.
That's so funny.
Are we ready to move on to Heroes and Villains, or do we have any other thoughts on structure? Okay, cool. Yeah, let's go to Heroes and Villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Okay, here in Heroes and Villains, we talk about the characters, what we like, what we don't like. Let's talk about Henry.
We need to talk about Henry.
I hate this character. So Henry, for those, perhaps you've not read it in a while, Henry is the blind uncle of the police chief Dale and also the town DJ. He's not just one DJ. He plays multiple characters, including George Rathbun, who is very loud and boisterous. Perhaps, Dan, did I text you and ask if he was like Bubba the Love Sponge?
I think he was. You had said it was, and the various voices and characters he does feel like a way for Straub and King to have their cake and eat it too. Like they want to do a morning zoo DJ.
Yeah, I asked you if like, is George Rathbun supposed to be a big bopper, or is he like, or is he like Bubba the Love Sponge?
Yeah,
I couldn't figure it out. I guess he ultimately fell on the side of bopper.
I almost. It's weird because I feel like they're almost trying to do some kind of morning zoo dude, but the only thing King and Straub know is like like Wolfman Jack and shit like that. And so it's this weird thing of like, and then it's weird because all the kids in town are like, oh yeah, like
they think he's so cool.
It's so, but I mean, I guess you could maybe chalk that up to the town being old fashioned and maybe stuck in the 50s a little bit or something. But it was so bizarre. And then Henry, it was weird too because I think the whole thing was supposed to be, Henry is actually this kind, mild-mannered blind dude, but then he does all these bawdy voices. But also Henry himself, the way he dressed and just all the character traits he had, he also felt like a radio character. It was like too much. I mean, but it was also kind of funny to me at the same time. But the
characters are the narrators, the
aliases,
like Straub and King are so obsessed with him. They think he is the coolest. Like this line, I wanted to throw the book across the room. Page 202 in mine. That Rebecca, the woman who Shipper is banging at the old folks home, she's looking at him And she says, all in all, sightless or not, Henry Layden, it comes to her, is far and away the coolest human being she has ever been privileged to encounter in her entire 26 years on the face of the earth. Never mind his clothes. Where did guys like this come from? I am just like, everyone needs to calm down. This is a 54-year-old man who wears sunglasses all the time. And I understand he's blind, but it's still...
It's sad, but I wish he would have reached out to me because my family actually did listen to Bubba. Like my dad earnestly loved him. And it is funny because they mentioned Howard Stern later. Henry mentions like Howard Stern, who was a dork.
Yeah, they call him a dork.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think you're right. King has this idea of like and the fact that Straub is like 80 now, it probably was like, oh, that was like what a radio DJ is. But they try to update him as like a little bit of a shock jock. I don't think that either one really listens to shock jocks. Like I could actually see King being turned off by that sort of, on-air personality. So I don't know that they could fully get a character kind of match that.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just curious, like, Jen, am I being too harsh? Do you like Henry?
I do. But you know what? Now that I'm hearing you guys, because I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think I just liked him in comparison to Jack, who feels like nothing. You know?
At least Henry like is a character.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I enjoy Henry quiet at home. Like I was fascinated by the chapters about him, like with his wife and missing her, and his death I felt like was really sad and horrific.
Yeah,
so I like that side of Henry, and I like his relationship with Jack, but I almost kind of just discounted all of the other voices because those were so fucking annoying.
I will say this, because we're just, well, I mean, at turns criticizing and praising the unique tone of this book. I feel like the good stuff that comes with that, we also have to take this because it's so eclectic that, okay, you get this great over the top villain like Burnside, but then you also get a Henry and the Thunder Five, which it almost feels like, if you ever read Confederacy of Dunces, which is not like a realistic book per se, but that book thrives off how colorful all the characters are. And I think Black House does to an extent, with the exception of Jack. But yeah, I think you just have to kind of swallow your medicine with a guy like Henry. And I don't know why.
Take your medicine.
Take your medicine. Yeah, get real dark with it. But
I just feel like the annoying thing about Henry is like they'll be driving in the car and then like Jack will say something about like, I don't know, something. He's like, "Oh, you taught me that, Henry," and then Henry would be like, "Oh, you're my star pupil," you know?
Yeah.
Like, stupid comments like that. I'm like,
I don't know why I kept thinking of this, but the way like all the teens love him and like the dancing and all this stuff, I kept thinking of in that movie Fern Gully, where what's the main character? I fucking hate Fern Gully.
Isn't his name Fern Gully?
Hate Fern Gully? I love
Axel. Is it Axel or some shit? I don't remember. Whatever.
Fern Gully, right?
When he comes into the jungle and he plays the rock music for them, and all the fairies are like, "Oh yeah!" Like that's like how I picture the town's reaction to Henry. And I remember as a kid,
it's like Saved by the Bell. Whenever like they're
exactly,
all these high schoolers are obsessed with Casey Kasem.
Right. Well, okay. And here's the thing that confused me too is like apparently it's a big mystery who he is, and like the rat thing is really secret. And like no, it's just the guy who is always doing other weird voices and showing up at discos. Like of course that's who it is.
It's that weird.
Yeah, the guy who doesn't do anything else.
Guy who shows up and does. Yeah.
Right. This town has like 50 people in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just shared a link on the doc, like, because I was like, oh, I need a refresher on some of these minor characters, and it's unbelievable how many characters are like listed in like the glossary.
Yeah.
Granted, there's some filler because one, it's like Black Sabbath, a rock band. I was like, okay, we got that one. I was looking more for the people at like the bar, but.
Yeah, for real. It's like, so yeah, we don't have to spend too much time on Henry. I will say, like, I love the scene where basically he, gets killed. Like the scene in his recording studio and Burnside is there. That's a really effective scene. And I agree with you, Jen. I think like him by himself, his history, sort of the life he leads, all that stuff's really cool. It's just in the same way that the narrators are so entranced by how competent and brilliant Jack is and how he's incapable, like he loves art, he loves great music, he loves great books, he's so handsome, the ladies love him, he's the greatest, like they literally say in the book he is the greatest detective that has ever lived. And I know part of that has to do with the fact that
Batman,
greatest detective pardon me.
I just know that I know part of it is the fact that he touched the talisman. So part of that has given him all of these advantages in life, and that, he is sort of this perfect human, partly because of that. But like I said earlier, literally the only thing that detracts from his sort of brilliance is the fact that he refuses to engage with this supernatural experience he had when he was young. I could not find, and like everyone is so impressed by him. Like Beezer is like, wow, this guy.
Does he say something like, because he doesn't trust him at first, but then there's a bit where it's like, oh, Jack stood next to him, showing he wasn't afraid, and they're like, oh, you're all right, Hollywood.
Exactly.
Right.
I was gonna be like, you know what, Hollywood, you all right.
I'm telling you, he's just super hot. That's probably what it is.
I mean,
he's got this like magnetism.
He's a king protagonist, of course he is. Yeah,
Well, yeah.
And also too, but for whatever reason. And I know I spent years in this podcast railing on the bikers, but they're over the top and goofy in a way that was actually pretty funny to me this time around.
Yeah.
And where but Jack and even Henry to an extent not so much. I'm not sure why that is. I think because I don't know, I was so anticipating the bikers too that it was just like a treat to get to them.
Well, they feel like real characters. And like, as I'm noticing, I was defending Henry a little bit, but I didn't even put him on my list because I forgot about him until he started talking. So like, there's just not much to him other than the obnoxiousness.
I think too, there's always, for me, kind of an inherent goofiness about certain subcultures. Like Fleeger and I went to this rock gym one time in Gainesville, and we were just, climbing rocks or whatever. And there's this like fucking instructor there who was like, he's like, you want to do it, you got to, and he did this like Spider-Man movie. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like,
and he like laid on his back and was looking. He's like, you'll get up there and you'll just be like,
yeah, and like,
who lost?
And
we're
I
like,
feel,
dude, we're at a rock gym. You're not.
I feel that way
Everest.
when I talk to people who are into like quote extreme sports like that, or bikers, and all they really know how to do is talk about that lifestyle. But then there's not a ton of depth behind them, and so and there's also a very specific thing where like if you go on a bachelor party and you got some roughnecks coming along with you, some friends from back home. And it's like, oh, get ready for these guys. They're crazy. And then you meet them, and they're like, you're not that crazy. You just like to drink a lot. Like that. And all you do is
right.
Just
like,
get sloppy, my man.
Like I remember I went to a family member's wedding, and I didn't go to the bachelor party, but the next day I was talking a lot of the groomsmen. I'm like, oh, how was it though? Oh man, it was a real shit show, to be honest. Like that's all they could talk about. And I'm like, there's no depth to you. And so I think but there's something funny about that too. And with the bikers especially, there's that element. They're just like, oh my God, these guys are so fucking big and tough, but also they're smart because they went to college. Like,
I know.
It's entertaining. It's entertaining.
It feels a little. Oh, go ahead, Fleeger.
It's a meaningless comment, but yeah, I went to a bachelor party and there was this guy that was, bro-y, and I was like, dude, you have the energy of a high school baseball coach, and he's like, I coach baseball.
Oh.
And he was a nice enough guy. Like I can get along in all those worlds, but I just want to say this is the keen observations, which is why I'm in this losers club here.
Yeah, I'll say like there are some efforts at like there were actually some surprising character moments with the bikers, like because I was kind of rolling my eyes at, I remembered them the way you did, Dan. Yeah. And so I was rolling my eyes at sort of the early characterizations where it's like these guys, like they ride up and down the highway chugging beers, they go to the bar, they pick fights, and then they go back home and read William Blake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they talk Kierkegaard or
they
whatever.
talk Kierkegaard and Tolstoy, and I'm just kind of like, that's so corny. But then
it's like funny though. It is.
But then it is. But like then we get some great scenes later, like where we get to the flashbacks, like Doc's flashback about like misprescribing the girl and she dies. That's effective. And then Mouse's backstory with the girl who died after they drove by the Black House. That stuff's affecting, and they're well told backstories.
Yes.
And like Sunny has one too that I found really effective. Honestly, I feel like we didn't get that for Beezer, who still came across as kind of silly to me. But I will say it's just like those moments really flesh out the characters more so than I was expecting, but just they seem to get so much juice out of the idea that these guys are like 285 pounds and wear leather and they also read Turgenev.
Well, I know it's funny. And I will say this, no joke, I had forgotten that Beezer's daughter had gotten killed, but like I had actually forgotten that, and so that automatically I'm like, okay, this guy has a little bit more investment. I remember them just being as like, we're the town tough guys. What do you need help with, boss? And also too, the idea that was, and once again, I am not saying there can't be smart bikers out there at all, but it goes back. It's that thing that King does with Jerome a little bit in the Hodges trilogy, where he leans so far into trying to go against the stereotype that becomes a little bit like offensive in his case, unbelievable. But and then also, I will say this: yes, okay, the biker. It's funny to me that the parameters for their intelligence it's the fact that they went to college, because I know a lot of fucking morons that went to college also.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just because someone went to college does not mean they're smart. And so I think that's what was funny, that it just seemed like, oh yeah, college. Yeah, Doc was like a fucking neurosurgeon, and the rest of these guys, they love philosophy. Bada bing, bada boom. I thought that was just very funny. Yeah.
Well, and it feels like a gotcha in a lot of ways, until we get to the later half, where I do feel like he fleshes out the story. And comparing it to Jerome, I think, is an apt comparison, because the way they hammer it home is like, it feels like, oh, joke's on you. You thought the bikers would be stupid. We know there's more to them. Exactly. And I'm like, no, I mean,
I was like, maybe. No, I thought they were probably, of normal intelligence, like
exactly.
everyone else.
It's not like we're in the 50s or something.
Yeah.
We're not like Devil Without a Care.
I haven't seen Sons of Anarchy yet. It's on the queue one day. But
no hurry.
Check it out. That's kind of how I'm approaching it. I don't have to see it before I die, but if I live to be 90, maybe.
If you've read Hamlet, you get the gist.
Okay, got it. Yeah. But there's actually a biker group called Bikers Against Child Abuse that I think is really cool. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. These are like very moving videos, but presumably a lot of bikers come from a rough background. Yeah. So they formed this group in 1995. And if you're a child who's been abused, they will show up and give you like their vest of their club. And when you testify in court, they all sit in the front row.
Oh,
so that it's like anyone that could hurt you, they're gonna have to get through me first. And I just think like I'm getting like goosebumps talking about it.
Yeah.
It's so impressive though, because these guys are like, you have nothing to fear, because like it's hard as a child to testify if the person who abused you is in the courtroom.
Yeah. So
to me, that's like these guys. They're kind of like the angels with dirty faces kind of thing. And even like with Mouse, like I was picturing like Tom Sizemore from Saving Private Ryan. When he was like, he's wounded and he's like, oh, it's nothing, man. Got bit by a dog.
Hey, wait, are the Bikers Against Child Abuse, isn't that have you seen Bad Grandpa, the Jackass movie?
I've only seen parts of it, actually.
Part of the prank is because the whole thing is like the grandpa, he's taking the kid to like his biological dad, who's like an asshole, and he like recruits that group. But I mean, it's like he really recruits them because it's a stunt movie or whatever. But it was funny because when I heard that, I'm like, Bikers Against Child Abuse, is that real? But yeah, I guess it is. I wanted to say, because Randall, didn't you say you had pictured the actor Mickey Jones as Beezer? Do you want to say who Mickey Jones is really quick?
Well, I texted Dan and I said, I can't not, whenever I read this, think of the guy, and I didn't say Mickey Jones because I didn't know his name. I said the guy who played bikers on like every TGIF sitcom back in the day. So like
Home Improvement,
like Full House, like Home Improvement, Step by Step. There was like one or two guys who they just recruited to play all of the different shows, and that's how I remembered them. And Dan Googled him and found him, and he used to play drums for like Bruce Springsteen
or Bob Dylan.
Right?
He played
Bob
Kenny
Dylan.
Rogers. Yeah, it was great. He's like this well-known musician first. Also, too, it's funny that like the King, I mean, and once again, yes, there are a lot of big bikers, but he goes so far. Anytime they're staying aligned, it's always their arms are crossed, and he describes their arms looking blue because there's so many tattoos on them, and they're like their muscles are just fucking gigantic. It got to the point. I think because they'd forgotten about the Amy thing, and because, like you said, when they go into the Black House, they add more depth. So that actually scored some points for me as characters. But it just got so funny to me at a certain point, and because I was tracking the unique tone of this book a little bit more, like the kind of taking the piss out of things a little bit more, I actually enjoyed them quite a bit this time. Like they brought a lot of color to it. So yeah, and some good death scene too. We'll get to with
we'll get to that. So so who else I guess stood out to you? We can talk about Burnside a little bit, who I think is a wonderful character, and they have so much fun describing that character. I mean, because he's so grotesque, and like they just spend paragraphs talking about his droopy jaw and the drool dripping from his mouth and his mottled head and just like his like skeletal frame, like all this stuff. It's they're having so much fun with that character.
Yeah, real quick, do we want to say anything else about Jack? I kind of feel like we said he's like a non-character.
I have nothing else to say about Jack.
I mean, it's
he's
Bobby,
like
he's
2000s Ben Mears.
Yeah, Ben Mears is a total apt comparison. I always know what I thought of with Burnside. I don't know if this is a bit of a stretch, but in the Hodges trilogy. Oh my gosh, the first killer who in the first book.
Brady.
Yeah, Brady
but you know what?
Hartsfield.
I don't want to spoil anything because I actually saw some comparisons just in how everyone else views him versus how he is. If that makes sense. But we haven't gotten to that book yet. Yeah, so I don't want to say anything specific about it. But yeah,
sure.
no, everything you say about Burns, I love how just. I mean, they made him old. They made him gross. They made him sexual. They made him all this stuff. Like, just so, and not really. Even though he's a child killer, he doesn't have a ton of power without Munchin or whatever in him. And so, I'm always a fan of pathetic king villains that get this modicum of power and just run with it. There's something really satisfying and gross about that a little bit. So yeah, I
want to read this section. This is from early in the book. I feel like it's just great writing and shows how much fun they're having. They say it was never a pretty face, and now the skin is gray and the cheeks are sunken potholes. Prominent blue veins wind over the gray scalp, spotted as a plover's egg. The rubbery-looking nose hooks slightly to the right, which adds to the impression of slyness and concealment. The wormy lips curl in a disquieting smile, the smile of an arsonist contemplating a burning building that may, after all, be merely a grimace. Here is a true American loner, an internal vagrant, a creature of shabby rooms and cheap diners, of aimless journeys resentfully taken, a collector of wounds and injuries lovingly fingered and refingered. Here is a spy with no cause higher than himself. Bernie's real name is Carl Beerstone, and under this name he conducted in Chicago from his mid-20s until the age of 46 a secret rampage, an unofficial war during which he committed wretched deeds for the sake of the pleasures they afforded him. Carl Beerstone is Bernie's great secret, for he cannot allow anyone to know that this former incarnation, this earlier self, still lives inside his skin. Carl Beerstone's awful pleasures, his foul toys, are also Bernie's, and he must keep them hidden in the darkness where only he can find them. It's such a great intro to that character. And they just, we hear about his disgusting nose and mouth and eyes like 80,000 times, and I was there every time for it.
Yeah, and just
one thing go ahead.
No, you go, Jen.
The one thing I remembered from this book before I read it again was how he's just constantly covered in shit.
Yes.
And I was hesitant to read it again because it grossed me out so much.
Yeah, I have another little bit here. Moving by increments, the old man turns around. First 1 foot shifts, then a knee, the spavined waist, the second foot, finally the cadaverous trunk. The ugly bloom of Bernie's head droops on its thin stalk, offering Rebecca a view of his mottled scalp. His long nose protrudes like a warped rudder. With the same dreadful slowness, his head lifts to reveal muddy eyes and a slack mouth. A flash of sheer vindictiveness rises into the dull eyes, and the dead lips writhe. It's just like... he's so nasty. And but then there's some humor in that character too, which I'm gonna share in a little bit. But yeah, any other thoughts on Burnside?
Well, just to think about him as like being the last thing that some of these children see is just so upsetting. Like he is a disgusting and a comic villain in a lot of ways, but he may be one of King's most evil just for the sake of evil villains, or just like wanting to cause pain. You know?
And he's so like when he's with Tyler near the end, he's just grabbing his ass and like he's just so open about the fact that I want to rape you. It's nasty.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say too, even because there are other King. I mean, you have like your Harold Lauders, right, who are not psychopaths and not serial killers. They're bad, but King really shows the descent. How they could go either way, right? And then you have people like Junior Rennie in Under the Dome, who is a psychopath and is a rapist and I guess would he be a serial killer? Yeah, I guess he's a serial killer. And
I think so. He's a necrophiliac,
right? Yeah, and so you have him, but I feel like King goes to great lengths to show why Junior is the way he is, even if it's just being born with a defect or whatever. Where in this, I feel like him and Straub have no interest in doing that, which is, once again, not a problem. I think it plays into that Gothic Dickensian thing we talked about there being clear good guys and clear bad guys. And so, yeah, as disgusting and horrible and evil as he is, I mean, it feels very much in line with the book. And also, if we're talking about, okay, we have like the most vanilla, uninteresting protagonist, let's have the most disgusting, colorful, nasty antagonist.
Totally.
I mean, that's great, right? You want that. You want, like you said, the villains are more fun here, I think.
Well, and it also kind of, this may be a stretch, but he reminded me of like Hugh B. Marston in some ways, like kind of this older villain. And it could be just because they both spent time in Chicago, I think. But I was interested in talking about Albert Fish because Burnside's death is very satisfying to me. Like I find him like realizing that pain actually can happen for him, you know, and that it's not like the line is like, it's nowhere near the amount of pain that he caused, but it's more than he's ever experienced. And to compare that to Albert Fish, like he was begging for the electric chair. He was like, oh, this will be interesting. You know, he wasn't really afraid of death. And I mean, I guess nobody is really there in someone's final moments, but it almost feels like a kind of restating the balance of like he does get some kind of comeuppance in some way, like especially given how closely tied he is to a real person who we cannot go back and torture or give pain to, you know.
Because his psychological profile too, he had people usually on the spectrum tend to be like masochist or sadist, but he was sadist and a masochist, so enjoyed receiving the pain as well as giving it. But as for Bernie, if you recall the character Gasher, Wastelands.
That's right. Yeah,
he reminded me a lot of him, of just like this disgusting, like underling that just, I don't know, it was kind of a joke to everyone.
Right. Yeah, and he kind of gets like humiliated by Mr. Munchin too, like before he dies. So he does, you know, his death is as prolonged as it should be. And then I just love like first he gets his balls completely smashed and ripped to shreds. Like they really savor that ball destroying, which I'll read some from later. And then he also just gets his fucking intestines yanked out like rope, you know. And even as a further indignity, which I kind of love, then Tyler uses his intestines as a rope to pull that bag close to him, which is so fucking like, that to me is definitely Straub or King trying to make the other one laugh.
Which hey, then that hole was thanks to Henry, right? We wouldn't have had that without one Henry.
I know exactly. Yeah. It's a super fun character. And then I also kind of enjoy, just in terms of the bad characters in this book, I also have a lot of fun with Chipper, even though I think that's a character they thought they were going to have more use for early in the book. And then they're like, oh, I guess we don't. Let's just kill him like really violently.
But I really enjoyed that death. Yeah, it feels like, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a character in like later Dark Tower thinks he's like a real badass, and I love just the thought of Chipper sitting in this office and thinking he is in control of everything, and then just getting completely ripped apart. You know, there's something very satisfying about that, but he's gross too, you know.
I know. Yeah, it's a fun, you know, and like that's an example where the judgment of the omniscient narrators really factors in, because they're very much like, look at him as, you know, and he is a criminal, but they're very much just like, this guy is a piece of shit. Like they basically say that very, very forcefully.
But he's like the smooth talking piece of shit compared to Burnside, who is like actual shit, you know, and likely covered in it.
Any other characters you guys want to talk about before we move on?
Go ahead, Jen. Please. No, Jen, please. We're doing the Midwest standoff, which
I know. Well, I'd like to mention that we have not mentioned any female characters, which is my big problem with this book.
Go off, Queen.
It does not pass the Bechdel test. I actually made a list of the female characters as I was going through my notes, and I came up with Rebecca Vilas, who doesn't really do it. She kind of exists to further the plot and for Chipper to be gross with.
To gawk at.
Exactly. And to provide a really funny piece of pound cake that I have on my list. And then there's Bear Girl, who, you know, doesn't really do anything. There's the lady at the end whose name I can't even remember. There are some old ladies at the nursing home. And there's Judy and Sophie, who are essentially the same person, and who even then don't actually do anything. That is my big problem with the Talisman. It feels like such a boys' adventure book, so I almost can give it a pass. But here, this is so much more about adults. Like, I wanted them to fucking do something. This is such a male-dominated book, and it doesn't need to be, you know? So that's my big problem with this book.
Yeah, Judy and Sophie are definitely in my misery section. They're very much defined by their helplessness and their utter transfixing beauty. Is just annoying. So So yeah, I'm with you, Jen. I think that is an absolutely valid criticism. I love Bear Girl, but we get nothing more. But she's actually to me in some ways more interesting. Like I would love to spend more time with her and Beezer. I feel like that's where a lot of character would live.
Right.
But we don't really get much there.
Yeah, we just get that one scene. I think she's asleep. Like when he's home, kind of contemplate. He's like, oh, Bear Girl's asleep in the other room, and he's kind of sorting through some of his demons. And I was like, yeah, I would be kind of interested to see like a conversation with them or something, you know? But,
I mean, yeah. And like, I think some of the women, like the woman in Mouse's flashback, I think sounds like she's a great character for what we know of her, but then we only get that little bit, you know?
But they exist in other people's stories. Like they don't have stories of their own. They exist because of what the male characters are doing and they react to that. So that's my frustration. But we also didn't talk about Wendell Green. Is that who you were going to mention?
Yeah, Wendell. I like
Wendell Percy Wetmore Green.
I was going to say the Anal University trio, but no, we can save that for...
Well, I think Flieger, you sort of mentioned Wendell earlier, and I concur. Like, I don't mind the greasy, sleazy journalist archetype, but he's such a comically like corrupt and soulless kind of character that, and he's fun, but he's almost too pathetic to be like super interesting. Like he always gets bested, you know what I mean? Like he's always getting punched by someone or bonked in the head by someone or foiled in his plans. I almost wanted him to have more success as a villain. He's just kind of like a loser for all the good guys to bully. And he deserves the bullying, but he's
they make him, he's like such a little twerp too.
But he's like very like these like grandiose notions where they're like, sorry, I can't let you win, sir. And he's like, don't you think a free press is the like cornerstone of our democracy? And then he's like, how about $20? Like he just can't even like, he knows he's not going to convince anyone. So he's just like, fine, I'll just bribe you. He reminded me of like, if there was like a bumbling, I feel like Robert Downey Jr. and what's the, oh man, I'm like drawing the Juliette Lewis.
Natural Born Killers?
Yeah. Like his character in that where he's like the journalist that's like embedded in the jail. And then he starts realizing like he's in over his head while he's there. But yeah, he's not even my favorite character, but I do think it was funny that he got, transported alongside them, because it's always good to have a character who truly has no idea what is going on.
But I wanted that to have more weight than it did. Like I really didn't want him to be able to come back from that. And it reminded me of what's the one Lacey's story where the creepy guy that talks goes over and he like he gets like consumed by the world, not to spoil anything, but I wanted that. And instead he came back and he ends up with this picture that like becomes super famous. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to say just the one line that Parkus says to him, where he basically says like, take your time, partner. I know you got to get your branded iron hot, because Wendell, when he first comes, is like speaking gibberish and can't even process what's happening.
Yeah. What did you want to say about Parkus?
I thought I had more, but I think it's just, he is an interesting character in that he's not a gunslinger per se. So it's in their minds, they're like, oh, you're a gunslinger. And he's like he has the gunslinger guns. So you think like, oh, he might've picked this off of a corpse, but he also mentions how time moves a little odd. And you wonder if maybe down the road, if they do a third book, if he might actually be a gunslinger by that time, because there's so few left and there's like a need for bodies. I don't know. Did you guys have any thoughts on Parkus?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Well, I mean, he is a magical Negro character. I think more so in the Talisman, but he is one of the ones that Scott Wood talks about in his presentation. And I think I find him less egregious in this one because he doesn't really do that much in this one.
He's just there to kind of dump out exposition. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that he is, part of a problematic trend that King has.
I feel in some ways that King was trying to resist, like, because I think Speedy is like the manifestation that most contributes to that stereotype, whereas Parkus is more of like a competent person of power within who doesn't speak in sort of that affected language that King uses sometimes. And so I feel like that was the attempt to sort of perhaps, I don't know, resist and pull away from the Speedy character as it existed. But the character still is the character,
It was funny because when I'd forgotten that he makes an appearance here. And honestly, part of what I liked about the book is that it's not tied too closely to the Talisman, because I'm not the biggest fan of the Talisman. But it was fun when he came back up. In my head, I was like, oh shit, here comes Speedy again. But then I was like, this isn't that bad. He definitely is just like an information dump of a character, but it's just in a few select scenes. So I appreciate that they held back a little bit. I mean, and I do wonder, I'm like, could they have just found someone else to do it rather than bringing him back? But
like
yeah,
Sophie.
Yeah.
Give her
Exactly.
something to do.
He wasn't quite as egregious to me as he was in the Talisman. It's like bad,
And I think Parkus, there's one funny line though, it ties back to Wendell, where they're eating like bird meat at dinner. I think it's either hawk or something, and he basically, that was like a metaphor for the press of like he gets a morsel, but he makes a meal out of it. Like Wendell is just like devouring it as quick as he can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They definitely have a lot of fun with Wendell. But yeah, I think he's a little bit too much of like a cuck, I needed that character to have a little bit more power. And it's not that I needed any gray area. Like I didn't need him to be complicated. It's just that, I don't know. I want my bad guys to win a couple times.
Well, so Wendell survives, right?
Yeah. Well, he does at the end. He sort of wins because he gets the photo of Jack being shot.
Right. But then they do the Drudge report, and I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if Wendell could have written up that article?
Well, Drudge was always an aggregator, so I feel like
Oh, that's true. I guess
it's probably, and this is a local report, so I think the fact that it was on Drudge is what that's what back in that era, every reporter's dream was to get a story featured on Drudge. Because that was the aggregator that everyone looked at. Yeah. Any other characters before we hop on over to our next section? Cool. Let's get miserable.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my misery!
Annie!
Here in Misery, we talk about the stuff we kind of hated. There's probably a handful of things here that we can all talk about, but I'll kick it off by saying I hate the term bitch rod. Just it doesn't feel like a real insult. It feels like something they made up and to sound like something young people would say. And I've never heard it uttered anywhere else, and I don't think it's a particularly clever insult.
No, when you just said it, I thought part of me was like, is that part of their bikes? Like, is that what they call their motorcycles? Because I've never heard that used as an insult.
Well, yeah. And then we also get the phrase "go suck an elf," which one of the little boys says. And it's obviously King, because they say he picked it up from a TV show on the Sci-Fi Network called The 10th Kingdom. And I Googled it and it's real. And you're like, of course it's King talking about some weird ass show he watched. So The 10th Kingdom is an American fairy tale fantasy miniseries that aired beginning February 27, 2000. And it was broadcast over 5 nights in 2-hour episodes. And it won an Emmy for Outstanding Main Title Design.
Yeah, I remember The 10th Kingdom.
It had John Larroquette, the great John Larroquette, Ed O'Neill, Anne Margaret, and Deanne West. Pretty good cast. But I just thought it was an early instance of King just throwing in some random TV show he watched.
Yep. A trend that will continue.
I don't really have much misery in this. I really love the prose throughout. We've talked about some of the character flaws, but the actual writing itself, I think there wasn't much that stuck out like a sore thumb to me. And I don't know, I'm hesitant to even read this because once again I think it's kind of funny. It involves the bikers, but I'll go ahead anyway. This is on page 256 of the first edition. So it's when it's a biker scene, like I said. It's when they're gathering around the law enforcement, and the crowd is there. Beezer's friends move apart and approach the crowd. The chief moves besides Pam, who first looks at him in amazement, then nods. Mouse snarls at Hoover Dalrymple and says, "By the power invested in me, I order you to get the fuck out of here, Hoover." The old man vanishes so quickly, he seems to dematerialize. Like I said, it's kind of funny, but it just made me laugh because once again, it's like, oh my God, these guys are so tough. And they're like this like skinny old, it just sounded like a cartoon. Like I already get the fuck out. And the old man like, yes, sir. It just made me laugh. Like when I read it. Yeah.
Jen, what you got?
I have one.
Fleeger, go ahead.
That ties back to Halloween Kills, actually, and that's when the crowd congregates and is going, "Bring him out, bring him
Yeah,
out,
evil
give
dies
us the
tonight."
killer, give us the killer."
Free beer.
Give us the killer. What's also like, I think crowd scenes in this book are always kind of funny because like everyone's there and it's like they're all like little Abner characters kind of.
Yeah, I always have issues with like crowds and protests because in movies the protest signs look too clean. And in real life, the signs are like spelling errors and they're dirty. And stuff.
We talk a lot about. I mean, the whole internet does about all the bad extras lines in The Dark Knight from all the crowd scenes. The Dark Knight's like an amazing movie. Obviously, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But it's so hard to get crowd scenes right in films because most of the time it's like they're day players who aren't. I don't think they've been coached in the aesthetic of the movie. Even if they're good actors, they're not really like keyed into the style. And yeah, crowd scenes. I don't know. They're tough and they're hard to do. And King books, they're kind of funny sometimes.
The only good extra story I've ever heard was in the comedian Doug Benson is in Blade Runner, and he's one of the characters on the street. But he kept positioning himself in front of Harrison Ford when he was running, so that Harrison would crash into him, so that he would make the movie, and he did.
That's
funny.
Awesome. I love that.
So I hate it when two beautiful people fall in love with each other simply because they're both so beautiful.
Yep.
And they can't resist it. Like when it was already weird to me that like Jack was lusting after the married woman who's in the middle of like a psychotic breakdown.
Yeah, in the mental
institute.
Yeah, that was weird.
And Jack's already drooling over her and like wants to cuck this man who just lost his child. And then when he goes over to the territories and it's like, oh, I could fuck her here, you know? And it's true. It's like he's so horny for her so instantly. And like and the way that they talk about like how hot and how beautiful she is, it's like it's like with Bag of Bones where the horniness level just gets out of control and you want to spray everyone with a hose. Like it's like that a lot too. But I will just say I laughed so hard at there's a line on 570 where Jack is thinking about Sophie / Judy, and he says he is one love-struck daddy and wouldn't have it any other way. And then
love-struck daddy.
The thing that really made me laugh though was when they come back from. So when he comes back from the territories with Judy, and she was Sophie over there, and when they come back, they like immediately start like making out and fucking around, and I'm like, dude. You are cucking a man who you were just in a car with like earlier. But the thing that really made me laugh was if this is sort of this, they're not thinking about it, intense moment of spontaneous love between two people. The fact that it's like, I have the line, at the same moment, her hand slips inside his shirt, which has somehow come unbuttoned and tweaks his nipple. like in this moment of like spontaneous lust, like instead of grabbing his dick or something, you're like tweaking his nipple.
What does he say in The Wedding Singer, the guy who plays Carbone in Goodfellas? Who plays what does he say? He's like, oh, sometimes she plays my nipples or something. I can't remember. That's like what I think of when I hear about nipple.
I have a one-word defense for that. Twins.
It's very like in Twilight how like Jacob is really into Bella because she will eventually give birth to the woman that he imprints on. You know, it's very
bizarre.
Yeah, morally weird.
Oh,
sorry, spoiler.
It's okay. I'm never gonna watch it.
And
we're breaking down everybody.
Someone needs to film a twins commercial with like Talisman lore, like twinners.
Capri's maybe watched the YouTube Coors Light Twins commercial hundreds of times.
I love it. And the twins. The guy can't handle it. He's laughing so much.
Okay. Any other misery before we move on?
Yeah, I have two that really pissed me off. Okay, so first of all, I really wish that Beezer had a chance to kind of grieve Amy at the very end. It really bothers me that once they get to the Black House and they rescue Tyler, I wanted him to have this moment of like feeling happy that they rescued him, but also sad that they didn't get to rescue his own daughter. Like, I feel like they kind of forget about
her. That's a good point, yeah.
Or really like wondering if I was like, is she one of the kids in there? And I mean, I know they found her body, but still like, it's like he is just so happy that they rescued this child that he is just kind of, that's just solved the problem.
We don't find out much about Amy, I feel like.
No,
really. It's like she's dead and that's it.
Yeah, I know. And I wanted a little more from that. That's my small gripe. My big gripe is the fact that they made they threw in this weird thing about Sophie getting raped by Morgan Sloat. It's like, there's
Oh, yeah.
absolutely no reason for that other than for her to become more tragic and for Jack to love her more and want to save her more. It really pissed me off.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Yeah.
But I'll say the Amy thing, I'm just thinking about like him being like, and then, you know, like Jack saying something like, Beezer, I'm sorry your daughter's not here. I'm sorry she was untalented.
Exactly.
Unlike
Right.
Tyler here.
Well, and like I kind of want like a look when they say untalented, like the kids that don't get saved, you know. I just kept thinking, like, especially like with Irma, as much time as we spend with that body, and like, well,
yeah,
it's like,
Tyler.
sorry your child died, ma'am, but in our defense, he was untalented, so
Exactly,
he brought
yeah.
it on himself.
Totally, yeah. So those are my two.
Okay, cool. Let's pop on over.
Can I do one last one?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, just because it kind of dates it for me, the collecting of magic cards that the children, you know, they
Yeah.
talk about Pokemon, which I guess is still contemporary. But
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like magic cards kind of peaked at this time period, and it definitely gives it a little bit of a timely quality to the story of like, what do kids do? They ride their bike to 7-Eleven and get magic cards.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that feels accurate, but my thing was like, wait, did bullies play magic? Like, because these kids seem like bullies. And I was like, I thought only dorks played magic, but I could be totally wrong.
It's like, I'm going to tap your mana, nerd.
Okay. Let's move on to Sunnier Shores with Word Processor of the Gods.
And we're gonna make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Whether you don't hear me typing, what the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Fine. Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
Here we talk about the good writing, the stuff that we really loved, and the stuff that, you know, maybe even made us laugh. I know we usually save some of the more like beautiful prose for Word Processor, but my one like really genuine laugh I had like out loud, and you know, there's parts I find amusing, but I laughed out loud, was when Bernie comes back and he's like got blood on him, and it's like after I think he kidnaps Tyler, and he sees what's his name, Butch, Butch, who's like the guard, and then he's basically like, want to take your hand off that, Charles, about his paperweight, and Bernie goes, off what? Bernie asks, then adds, asswipe. And then later it says Bernie looks down at the rock, which he has just replaced. He drops his hand from it and just stands there, and then he says, clean me up, bozo, I shit myself. that sentence just made me laugh so hard. Clean me up, bozo, I shit myself.
Oh man, that's good.
I mean, who among us, you know?
Yeah.
So any other, what else do you guys have in this section?
I really enjoy, I mentioned it before, but once, I think it's when we get to the last section of the book at the very beginning, Black House and Beyond, where they're kind of giving the same sweeping Wisconsin small town treatment to the actual Black House itself. I won't read the whole thing, but it's that first little section in chapter 26, right after part 4 of the book. It says, Black House, like Shirley Jackson's Hill House, which referenced a lot in this pod, and by King himself, like the turn of the century monstrosity in Seattle known as Rose Red, it is not sane. It is not entirely of this world. It's hard to look at from the outside. The eyes play continual tricks, but if one can hold it steady for a few seconds, one sees a 3-story dwelling of a perfectly ordinary size. The color is unusual, yes, that dead black exterior, even the windows swab black, and it has a crouching, leaning aspect that would raise uneasy thoughts about its structural integrity. But if one could appraise it with the glamour of those other worlds stripped away, it would look almost as ordinary as Fred and Judy's place, if not so well maintained. And I almost put that in the cemetery, but for me, it's once again just applying that same treatment to something that's vastly different, that's not pastoral, that's actually very macabre. And also we get the references to it. Now, I actually haven't seen Rose Red. Is that Rose Red?
Yeah,
like,
it's not real. I think that's
it's one of King's little joke, like the man who writes horror stories up on the hill kind of thing he does.
It was going to come out soon, and we're going to be covering it on the pod in a few months. So yeah, it was a little tease of what's to come.
A little Dominion there, but in all seriousness, you know, we talk a lot about, especially when it comes to haunted houses, you know, the house itself is a character, but it really is here, and I feel like they toe that line really nicely with not revealing. And also too, the Black House has to be kind of nebulous and mean, it was built. It was almost built as this like world gateway kind of, right? But by supernatural means. So I like that they give it just enough detail to have some structure while still retaining how, I don't know, how much of a void it kind of is, and how just sort of ill-defined it is. I just think it's a really masterful bit of writing. And once again, I like that they continue that style throughout the book, no matter what the circumstances are. So yeah, I was a big fan of that passage.
Yeah. Flieger, what do you got?
I didn't see huge stretches of beautiful prose in this, but there were a couple like quips that I really enjoyed. So one was the case closed, game over, zip up your fly. I feel like that was Stephen King who wrote that.
Yeah,
that's a very kingy line. Yeah,
but hey, maybe it was Straub trying to be king.
Well, I didn't until you guys pointed that out. I didn't even think of that, but there were definitely some lines where I was like, I've not read Straub, but through process of elimination, I can tell what is his based on getting rid of those. King. The other, I like some of the like sing-songy Dark Tower stuff. So one was the king in his tower eating bread and honey, the breakers in the basement making all the money.
Yeah,
and obviously the larger implications of like capitalism and I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah.
I love this line on page 160. Judy waking up from a dream, and I just found this line so evocative. She has sucked some miserable, not quite a nightmare dream after her, like mucousy strings of afterbirth. Like that's just such a creepy line about like the residue of a nightmare like following you out of sleep, which I definitely is like a sensation I understand. I just thought that was such an evocative, like gross and grotesque line. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another like kind of visceral one for me, but just when they describe being hip deep in pig shit.
Yeah.
Pretty disgusting.
Yeah. I had one, the only one I really found that we haven't already talked about, and it's a little bit long, but I really loved it. It's when we're first seeing Irma Freneau's body, and it's on page 37. It says, "We're not here to weep, not like Ed, anyhow, in horrified shame and disbelief. A tremendous mystery has inhabited this hovel, and its effects and traces hover everywhere about us. We have come to observe, register, and record the impressions, the after images, left in the comet trail of the mystery. It speaks from their details, therefore it lingers in its own wake, therefore it surrounds us. A deep, deep gravity flows outward from the scene, and this gravity humbles us. Humility is our best, most accurate first response. Without it, we would miss the point. The great mystery would escape us, and we would go on deaf and blind, ignorant as pigs. Let us not go on like pigs. We must honor this scene. The flies, the dog worrying the severed foot, the poor, pale body of Irma Freneau, the magnitude of what befell Irma Freneau by acknowledging our littleness. In comparison, we are no more than vapors. A fat bee wanders in through the empty window frame in the side wall 6 feet from Irma's body and makes a slow exploratory circuit around the rear of the shack. Suspended beneath its blurred wings, the bee looks nearly too heavy for flight, but it proceeds with easy, unhurried deliberation, moving well above the bloody floor in a wide curve. The flies, the mongrel, and Irma pay it no attention. For us, though, the bee, which continues to drift contentedly about the rear of the horror chamber, has ceased to be a welcome distraction and has been absorbed into the surrounding mystery. It is a detail within the scene, and it too commands our humility and speaks. The weighty, burrowing rumble of its wings seems to define the exact center of the undulating sound waves, higher and pitched, produced by the greedy flies. Like a singer at a microphone in front of the chorus, the bee controls the aural background. The sound gathers and comes to a serious point. When the bee ambles into a shaft of yellow light streaming through the eastern wall, its stripes grow black and gold, the wings coalesce into a fan, and the insect becomes an intricate airborne wonder. The slaughtered girl flattens into the bloody floorboards. Our humility, our sense of littleness, our appreciation of the gravity deeply embedded in the scene grant us the sense of forces and powers beyond our understanding, of a kind of grandeur always present and at work, but perceptible only during moments like this. We have been honored, but the honor is unbearable. The speaking bee circles back to the window and passes into another world, and following his lead, we move on, out the window, into the sun, and into the upper air. And I just thought that was, one, beautiful, but it too kind of speaks to, I think, a lot of my feelings about true crime and like looking at crime scene photos and like this is a real person. Mm-hmm. This was a body that a mother and a father cared about, and that there was tragedy suffered here, and we are a witness to it. And I just thought it was a really, really poignant way of describing that, you know.
Yeah, that's like Straub like conducting a symphony almost.
Totally. I know. And just the inclusion of the bee when it because as I was reading it, part of me was like, do we need all of this about the bee? But he ties it back in, and it just is like, this is part of a scene that exists now as like a relic of this horrific thing. And we're getting a window into this, but we can't ever understand the amount of tragedy that happened here, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, that brought it down a little bit. But,
no, I love it. I've got one I just think is an interesting bit of it's a great this strikes me as a kind of a King thing rather than a Straub thing, the one I'm about to read, but it's a great little bit of character development for a minor character that we really don't need, but it doesn't take up a lot of space, and I find it kind of like weird, like it has a lot of weird truth in it. And I guess it speaks a little bit to the notions of good and evil, the light and dark that we've talked about. But it's the kid Ebby, Tyler's friend, who's kind of an asshole. When there's just this little bit of character that we get. It says he is grappling with the question of whether or not the fisherman has actually come close to him this morning, close enough to snatch one of his buddies. There is a bloodthirsty part of him that likes the idea, that relishes the thought of some shadowy, no-face monster killing the increasingly annoying Ty Marshall and eating him for lunch. There is also a childish part of him that is terrified of the boogeyman. This part will be in charge tonight as he lies awake in his room, looking at shadows that seem to take form and slink ever closer around his bed. And there is the older than his years part of him, which has taken instinctive and immediate measures to avoid the eye of authority, should Tyler's disappearance turn into what Ebby's father calls a fuckero. Was Ebby's father Beaver from Dreamcatcher? Anyways, I
thought Ebby was interesting. Yeah, and I pulled the part where it says he has like low cunning, and it talks about him like realizing that the simple story is the best. He strikes me as like a lesser bully, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not surprised me at all that you pulled that section.
Yeah, and it's like, because I think it's King's so good at writing bullies, and he's like, okay, I'm not gonna spend too much time with this one, but let me throw some of my bully insight into this.
Yeah.
I think he did that. So any other word processors here? Cool. Let's amble on over to the cemetery.
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
Here in the cemetery, we talk about the stuff that scared us. Some of that Irma stuff you were reading, Jen, I actually had in the cemetery because I found it eerie in its own way. But I think probably a lot of what we'll be reading here is probably more grotesque than anything. Does anybody want to kick us off here?
I won't read the whole sequence, but I mentioned before Mouse's death, which reminded me a lot of the deaths in Chernobyl, just people melting from the inside from that like dog thing or whatever. But they mention it later. Because I don't think you see the actual moment he dies. But later on, they ask about him, and they say something like, "Oh, he was just blood and foam at the end that we washed down the
hair
drain,
and foam,
hair and foam." That's what it was.
Yeah,
and that I thought about pulling a passage from that sequence, but that to me was just so freaky that like they just washed their friend down the drain. And I actually thought there was a lot of cemetery in this book. This may have been on the text thread somewhere. Someone talked about it being kind of like a precursor to The Outsider a little bit. Like mixing, and I said that. I think it's kind of like maybe a little, I like The Outsider, but I think it's a better version of that. But yeah, some of the more grisly sequences remind me of that. But that was my big one. That like sentence just really stuck with me.
Well, I want to just add, because I do want to read a little bit of Mouse's like melting leg, because it's so disgusting. I won't read all of it because I think it might make people puke as they're listening. But I will say, poking out of this spreading, vaguely leg-like mess is a foot that looks remarkably undamaged. If I wanted to, I could pull it right off, just like a squash off a vine.
Man, they talk a lot about like
my
just
stomach turn.
They talk a lot about him like just scratching his face and like skin sloughing off. Oh, that's so gross.
It's so nasty. It's one of like the just most purely grotesque deaths I think in all of King. What else do you guys have?
There's one, I don't even want to read it, and I didn't even want to look it up, but the mention of Poochie, one of, which I can't help but think, like, Poochie died on his way to his home planet. Yeah. But, like, that he is a victim of the fisherman, and he thinks about him when he's getting this erection, and it's just so, the way he describes it is so upsetting, and I wanted to mention it, but I don't want to revisit it.
Sure. I love... Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Well, I was going to say just the whole like Fred realizing that Tyler is gone. And I know I already mentioned it, but just the idea that this has actually happened to your own child. Like, I hate to be one of those people that's like, as a parent, this is terrifying. But like, you know, I can't help but think of my own children and think like, as I was listening to this, I was realizing my kids were both outside playing and I didn't know exactly where they were. And it was like, shit, what if there's, you know, I got to look out the window and find them. So,
yeah.
It's like the neighborhood's like, that's the Stephen King lady. She's like, come inside, the Crimson King.
Totally, yeah.
There's a
Can
part.
I say
like,
one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Fleer.
Just the, when, let me get the actual quote up here, but he's describing like, oh yeah, you know, Albert Fish liked eating baby butt. That's good eating. I was like,
I pulled that too. Yes. Okay.
Disgusting.
So it's because it's in Henry's Death. It's on page 526. This is my other one. A sound of chewing complete with smacking lips and crunching noises. You taste like shit. I'm eating your fingers and they taste like shit. You know what I like? Know my all-time favorite meal? The buttocks of a tender young child. Albert Fish liked that too. Oh yes, he did. Baby butt. That's good eating. And it's like pound cakey as that it is, it's like it's right on the line of like horrific because you know he actually did that, you know.
I thought it was kind of funny, just the idea of being like, you taste like shit.
Right, like, but like to think about like Henry hearing that
I know,
and
it's so
knowing
bad,
it's his
You're just like this ornery old man just like eating your fingers and being you
right.
taste like shit,
and then like judging you for not tasting good.
It's so darkly funny. I get a kick out of that. Caffrey, what do you got?
Oh, I anything with Gorg also. I thought we haven't really talked about Gorg the Crow, have we yet?
No, not really. Creepy stuff.
Like any scene with him talk. I don't know. I think King does talking animals really, really well, and also too, I feel like the Crow just as a piece of iconography, like with the stand and with Dark Tower and all this, like to see that pop up. And Gorg's death it was kind of funny because like it's like Jack like shooting this, or not shooting, but just like treating Gorg like he's like this drug kingpin he's taken down. But I actually thought like there's something about blood and feathers that freaks me out. Yeah, and when Gorg's in the bottle too, squawking, like I just thought him in general as a character was pretty freaky.
Yeah, the scene with Tansy where Irma's mother, where it's like tapping on the window and it's referencing the Raven and everything, very, very creepy.
And Nevermore, yeah.
Yeah, I love like it's kind of the first time that we see Burnside. He's like going to sleep and he's mumbling some of like the, mid-world language where he's like, Gorg tili dinet al abala, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, Gorg come, serve the abala, find Tansy, find the mother of Irma, serve the abala, Gorg, serve the Crimson King. Bernie's eyes slip closed. He goes to sleep with a smile on his face, and beneath their wrinkled lids, his eyes continue to glow like hooded lamps. I thought that was a really cool, creepy image.
I think cool when they mentioned the King too, the fire tends to get redder.
Yeah,
like that, I think that's pretty sweet.
And then I just want to read a little bit of Chipper's death because it's so gross and I love it. So let me see here. Bernie rams one blade into Chipper's mouth and closes the clippers on his sweaty cheek. Blood shoots across the desk and Chipper's eyes expand. Bernie yanks on the clippers and several teeth and a portion of Chipper's tongue fly from the yawning wound. He pushes himself upright and leans forward to grab the blades. Burnside steps back and lops off half of his right hand. And then he just keeps killing him. But that scene to me was deeply gross. And I mean, mouth horror, ear horror, eye horror, all of it gets me. Anything else here?
I won't read it, but the description of Charles Burnside kind of descending into Alzheimer's, I found really kind of upsetting and chilling,
Sure. Cool. All right, let's pop on over to Pound Cake.
After all you've been taught, everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin. Come to your closet and pray. Ask to be forgiven.
He's a nice boy, Mom. You like him. You really like him, Mama.
Here in Pound Cake, we talk about the bluer sides of King, the sex, the farts, the poo-poo. There's a lot of it here. I love on page 146 of my edition, they talk about Burnside shitting himself, and they said he's heading for the bathroom, or wait, how does this? Yeah, he's heading for the bathroom, but it's just a little bit late. I love to say lethal. A certain brown horse, call him Morning Thunder, has already bolted from its stall and no doubt galloped across Bernie's sheets.
I pulled that too.
Like, it's such a poetic way to talk about shit, you know.
I have not shit, but a little bit of pee on
Let's hear it.
page 4. I mean, I actually did. For being as fun as it is, you think this book would have a little bit more pound cake, and I think there's more shit cake than actual pound cake. But this is after Jack and Judith, right? Is that the mom that he Judy in the fucking mom is having the mental breakdown that he's seducing. So it's after their encounter where Jack comes back to snapping out midworld. It says Jack's clothes have been unbuttoned or perhaps blown open, but Wendell has fared much worse. His shirt is in tatters. His belly hangs over a pair of white boxer shorts, severely pee-stained in front. I don't know why. Just adding that touch with adding that touch to Wendell, just like, because once again, just like making him as disgusting as possible. It just like made me laugh. And when I misinterpreted it at first, I misread it and thought they were talking about Jack, and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. Like Jack is
he does have a flaw.
Yeah, exactly. So
he constantly pisses himself.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so pee stained, does that like imply that he's recently peed, or that he has peed and the stain is set?
I think like stain is set, like he's just like trickling on his pants a lot. You know?
So when you wash,
yeah.
They
well,
don't
you
come
know,
out?
the last couple of drops end up in your pants, as I
That
know
is
from
always,
Stephen
yeah.
King, right?
Yeah, but I had a pair of shorts, and for whatever reason, when I was done at the urinal, it would I would zip up, and they just, I don't know if the shorts were too tight or something. It would always like result in a little bit extra, and
everyone would see the stains.
Yeah,
you know what you need? You need one of those balls from Let the Right One In, like the piss ball that you stick right on the end of your penis and absorbs all your pee. Problem solved, you know?
Especially as I get older. I'll have to invest. Yeah.
Pete Wexler checking out Rebecca's Hottentots. Let's see here. As far as Ebby's dad is concerned, a sight like Rebecca Velas's Hottentots pushing out against her dress is like a good fire on a cold night. They are bigger than you'd expect on a slender little thing like her. And you know what? When the arms go up, the Hottentots go up too. I love how he's like this excited pervert, you know?
I love how he just goes, that's where there's instances of him just going on like 4 sentences too long, too, just like hitting you. I love it. It's so funny.
It's like, yep. Hottentots indeed. Like adding that at the end.
Yeah.
Hottentots is good. It's not as good as Jehoobies, but I do like
it.
No.
It always reminds me of the in Waiting for Guffman, the beans monologue. How like it just keeps going, like beans, fat
beans.
and juicy. Ooh, I love eating beans. Just saying
Don't get me going on beans.
Yeah. Can I mention one? I mentioned it earlier, but they're talking about a video. So the local political elite was scandalized by a video showing 3 traveling strippers who billed themselves as the Anal University Trio, performing a synchronized cucumber routine on the tiny stage. And I was trying to imagine, like ass to ass Requiem for a Dream, but I was like, wait, is trio? And then I'm like, wait, is there something else you could do with a cucumber?
Hey, you got to pay if you want to see the Anal University Trio do their magic.
That's true.
So, wait, what else do I have here? I just thought this was kind of funny. Like I wrote kind of cool, even though this is pound cake, but once in 1997, he and his partner Kirby Tessier found a single testicle sitting on top of a toilet tank in the Culver City Public Library, like an ancient soft-boiled egg. I just thought that was a fun little deal.
I missed that. That's
pretty fun.
I have 2, and they're both like within pages of each other. And speaking of Rebecca Vilas, so when we first meet her and Chipper, before you go over there, he says, I was thinking we could kind of stretch out on the sofa and fool around. Rebecca says, fool around how exactly? Gobble, 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 Chipper says, grinning like a satyr.
King love it. I love when he
loves gobble.
Now, to her credit, she does not think it's charming, although I assume she still does it. And then my other one is a Charlie Burnside one. If we had failed to guess that he was the origin of the stench in this room, the stains rising into the sheet that covers him make that clear. He has just evacuated massively into his bed, and the very least we can say about his response to the situation is that he does not mind a bit. No, sir. Shame is not a part of this picture. And I think it's after they talked about he has like a sleep erection too. So
he like revels in his shit. Like he just loves it. I think,
I love like just they have to say like he evacuated massively.
Massively.
It's just like a huge shit.
Yeah.
I was saying I was at page 590 and I was like, wow, they haven't mentioned Judy or Sophie's breasts yet. Like, that's impressive. And then we get many oarsmen, Sophie says, then makes a rowing motion that throws her breasts into charming relief.
Yep.
Just what a sentence.
Can't
Charming.
help himself.
Sweet.
And then
I wouldn't hate so much if they had any kind of personality,
Yeah. It's just love because they're both beautiful, which is annoying. Okay. I want to I kind of want to read the ball crushing because it's so intense. I'll just say, okay, Ty's groping right hand has what it wants, the loose dangling sack of the old man's balls. He squeezes with all the force in his body. He feels the monster's testicles squash towards each other, feels one of them rupture and deflate. And then later, before he can finish, Ty yanks forward on the spongy and deflating bag inside the old cotton pants. He yanks with all the force of panic, and something in there rips, italicized. Bernie's words dissolve in a liquid howl of agony. This is more pain than he has ever imagined. Certainly never in connection with himself. It's just so nasty.
I love it. That's great.
And so well earned too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You need to give a character like that kind of pain and death in the end.
Yeah. That's I follow hockey, and occasionally guys will get a ruptured testicle from a slap shot. And they talk to players and they're like, I'd rather have a compound fracture.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to be awful. Oh, God.
That'd be one of the worst pains you could imagine. And it's permanent.
My last one here.
Well, it's like a permanent injury. Once your ball is destroyed like that, it's liquefied. That's a gland. That's not like a bone that's going to heal.
Oh, can't fix
So,
it.
Ouchies.
My last one here. And I'm surprised you didn't catch this, Caffrey, because it relates to one of your favorite moments in Bachman history.
Oh no!
But,
yeah.
This is when Tyler's yanking Burnside's intestines out of his body, and he says, "A blue-gray." There it is. A blue-gray fold of gut as plump as sausage and perhaps still trying to digest Bernie's last Maxton cafeteria meal comes out with the audible pop of a champagne cork leaving the neck of its bottle. If you want to know what that is a reference to, listen to our road work episode.
Hey, I will
you
say
actually
this,
had that in King's Dominion,
Oh yeah,
I love that. Hey, look, that's how you do a champagne popping. It works here, But
and I think that's one of our highest rated books too. So check it out.
Yeah, it's right up there.
I will say the constant licking of her face, like Judy, like this nervous licking of her lips, I thought was disgusting.
It's gross.
And what the fuck is that about too?
Okay, cool. Let's walk off these pound cake calories in a place we call King's Dominion.
There's another world out there. I know there is.
Here in King's Dominion, we talk about the connections to King's other work, the multiverse, if you will. We've already discussed the Dark Tower, so we don't necessarily need to revisit all of that necessarily.
I have some new ones, but yeah.
But yeah, let's hear you go, Flieger. Hit us.
I was going to say, let's do start before those. I'll save those for the end.
Oh, okay, cool. Then I'll say a few. Let me do the obvious ones, maybe. Well, we already mentioned Rose Red. And actually, I'll save any Dark Tower related ones for you, Dan. On page 66, there was mention of a business with the name Henreid in the title, like Lloyd Henreid from The Stand. And
he's not bad for a piece of white bread.
And then this one struck me as Straub having fun with King. It's on page 150 of my edition. Because this struck me as not something King would write, but something that Straub would write to have a little fun with them. Who is it? Rebecca. And she says, light, she says, Ligth, hangs on there, on that hook, HOOK. It's something the DJ insists on. Says it gets him in the mood, MOO, and then she gets cut off. So I think that was him referencing the MOON from The Stand as sort of a fun way to, honor his writing partner here.
Yeah.
So,
well, and
Jen,
speaking of In the Mood is the song in 11/22/63 that they dance to throughout the story, and that's the first one that Henry plays at the dance.
That's
good catch.
Cool. I did not catch that one.
And also Libertyville is the town that Christine is set in.
Oh, wow.
Pennsylvania. So it's a different town, but it's the same
name.
Yeah.
Let me see here. I've got some room 237s, but I'm going to hold off on those. We got a blue chambray sighting on page 578. Parkas is wearing a blue chambray shirt. Gotta love that. And
Jack doesn't wear one, I don't think.
No, that's the only blue chambray I noticed in this one.
He's too cool for chambray. He's got like a shark skin suit or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll say Doc is giving a pep talk at one point. He says, sometimes you got to stand up.
Mm.
There we go. Speaking of the stand, the crow, obviously, I couldn't help but think of Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
From there. And then I have, the two-headed bird that Parkas has.
The parrot. I had that down. Yeah. It's like Marilyn from Eyes of the Dragon.
Yeah.
You mean Flagg?
Or Flagg. Wait, didn't they call him Merlin or Martin?
He's Merlin. He rotates generations.
What's he referred to in I guess it is Flagg.
He's
yeah,
Marilyn.
Eyes of the Dragon. Yeah, but they call him Marilyn at some point, right? Or,
yeah, you're right.
Either way, two-headed parrot.
So I have a few others on page 780. There's mention on page 488 they're talking about the Plutonian shore, which is a reference to Edgar Allan Poe, but they mention the idea of doors in different worlds and doors that will take you to different worlds on the shore, which reminded me of Drawing of the Three, obviously. In
the other world too, they use a word, the apopanics.
Yeah,
and it's a word that does not exist in a dictionary, and in an upcoming Dark Tower book there's a feather that is named the Apomanics.
Oh, interesting.
It's a word. It symbolizes something that's sort of unspoken.
Yeah. I have a few others, but they're more room 237s. So Flieger, why don't you go forward?
I mean, we covered a lot. Like, it's pretty obvious and explicit at times, the connections.
Yeah, the Crimson King.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and they mentioned like the Quartet. Just a couple, only two, but Burnside mentions Blaine and Patricia the mono.
Yep.
And he also explains that there is a third mono. So.
Yeah. And then we haven't mentioned the Ted Brodigan. They do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Munchin does mention Ted Brodigan specifically as one of the breakers. And perhaps that means we will see him again. We'll find out later this year.
And also the Tie's cap. So it's presumably to inhibit the shining power.
Mm-hmm.
And in later Dark Tower, Flagg may mention a cap that was borrowed from a certain French Landing, Wisconsin.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
That's about it for me.
Nice. Dan, do you have any more that we haven't?
No, not that you guys haven't caught. I don't think. I feel like there's always something we're missing that I'm sure listeners will point out. But I don't think so.
Page 308. Something is herding the old car, an older truck, like a corgi herding sheep. Molly, the thing of evil. We know King loves corgis. There's also a mention of a corgi later in the book as well. I think this is when he was starting to really get into corgis, was around this time, because I'm starting to see him pop up in the work. On page 607, somebody mispronounces the phrase caveat emptor, which is obviously one of Leland Gaunt's favorite phrases from Needful Things.
Buyer beware.
Yeah.
Now wait, are we talking about Leland Gaunt or his dwarf sidekick?
They're the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they are the same.
It's the guy from Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have on page 779, when they're in the Black House and they're seeing all the weird shit, they mention at one point walking down a staircase of green glass. This, of course, made me think of the Wizard of Oz palace that they stumble upon in Wizard and Glass, and is also referenced they see a sort of glass castle in the excerpt from Fairy Tale that Entertainment Weekly released when that book was announced. And then also, I just found this curious. Mr. Munchin, when they sort of describe his shifting appearance, which kind of is fades in and out and changes, they mention that he has orange tufted hair or tufts of orange hair sometimes, which hold on, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, sometimes there seem to be tufted snarls of orange hair leaping up from his distended skull, and then they mention red lips and things of that nature, which I have to be honest, it kind of made me think of Pennywise.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm not pulling a Screen Rant right now and saying Randall Flagg and Pennywise are the same person. I'm just saying I saw orange when I can't see orange tufted hair and frequent mentions of the color red without thinking a little bit of Pennywise.
And just to add on that, I love like the idea of approaching an actor who plays a part in a Stephen King book and being like, "What do you think of this deep lore?" While you're on film festivals doing something else. Like, oh, this answer will finally close the gap.
Right.
Go ahead.
I want to shout out that they mentioned Scream just because I love Scream. It's not connected to King's universe, but
And Blair Witch.
they say like Scream part. They say like it's Scream Part 4,
right,
like
but
that.
it's before I think actual Scream Part 4.
Right.
You know,
right.
yeah,
That was very funny to me.
And Blair Witch Project too. Yeah.
Yep. Which I think he mentions Blair Witch and Dreamcatcher as well. I think he was a big fan of that movie.
Well, he watched it in the hospital, I think, and it like scared
yeah.
the shit out of him.
Wow, he's all drugged up and watching Blair Witch. That's terrifying.
I know.
It's like, Tabby, what is this?
Why
like,
is the
You
camera
can't just
shaking?
put movies.
You tell me, Steven, you watched it 30 times.
Okay, we got a big one here. Page 780. They're in the Black House. By the time they reach the far side, they're all panting and out of breath. Their shoes muddy, their clothes filthy. There are 3 doors here. And they have to choose which one to go to. Of course, maybe they go It Chapter 2. A movie I've somehow seen twice. So
I love It Chapter 2.
I do too. Also, Far Side, maybe Gary Larson shout out.
hey. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was.
I mean, King would be a big fan of Gary Larson.
I do love Gary Larson.
I do.
That's all I got with King's Dominion. I think it's time to move on to our final thoughts.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago. Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
All right, here in Final Thoughts, we share our final thoughts. We give a clown nose ranking, 1 to 5 bright red Pennywise clown noses. And we also say our MVP of the book. Kath, I'm going to kick it off with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give this. I know we definitely had some criticisms, but I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 bright red Pennywise clown noses, just because it still feels, even more so than when I first read it, it feels like a very unique entry in the King canon and the Straub canon too. Not that I've read a lot of Peter Straub, but I love seeing, one of you said that you feel like the theme of this book is friendship, right? Writerly friendship, these two guys coming together. And I love how different it feels from the Talisman while still feeling very much connected to that book, which Dr. Sleep doesn't do for me. And once again, Dr. Sleep, I think, is the more famous book, the more famous of his sequels, right? Like his grown-up sequel of the protagonist forgetting everything that happened to him, which seems to be a device that he's been interested in throughout his career. Yeah, we've gone over the prose. The POV feels really unique. I love him and Straub trying to outgross each other. I feel like the book works well as both I don't want to say a mystery because you kind of know who's doing the killing pretty early on, but as a crime novel and a supernatural horror novel, I think King has been less successful in later attempts to synthesize those two genres. So yeah, I'm all aboard on the Black House. But yeah, there's some length criticisms we talked about, some of the character criticisms, but once again, I think because it's so colorful and idiosyncratic and we're in a different King locale, it just stands out to me. And I had a blast. White knuckle thriller.
High octane.
High octane. This was one roller coaster I did not want to get off of. for bright red Pennywise clown noses.
And your MVP?
My MVP. Oh man, this is such a tough one because I love the villains in here. I want to say Burnside, but you know what? I'm gonna go with the Thunder 5 because I trashed them for so long, and they have a little bit more depth than I remembered, and they just cracked me up in that. Once again, I am no fan of like the biker culture that King seems fascinated by, but this, like you said, it was almost the TGIF version of it, and that was very entertaining to me. So, and hey, we get what in my opinion is the scariest scene, which is Mouse's death from that too. So I'll go with the Thunder 5.
Nice, Jen.
Well, before I give my final thought, I forgot one King's Dominion. The part with the bees is very much like the end of Misery's Return when she is covered in bees.
Oh yeah.
Which I love. And that's my MVP is the bees. I love them, and I'm kind of just like viewing them as maybe the floating narrator, you know. So that's my
cool.
MVP
like a cloud of bees going. Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Hive mind. Yes.
Whoa, yeah. So my MVP is like the narrator, omniscient bee people, and I think I would give this a 4 if it had a female character that I thought was interesting. So I'm going to officially give it a 3.5. If it did have a female character that did something, I would give it a 4 because I do really, really enjoy this book. I found it really relaxing and I could kind of just go along for the ride with it. which normally I think King's work invites me to really dig into stuff. It hits a lot of like kind of my feelings about true crime and really upsetting like child murder. And it is a really upsetting story. Like the content of it is something that I would expect to hate and to have a really hard time getting through. But I think it is handled in such a sensitive but lighthearted way. Like they really just strike the perfect mix of like digging into the horrific elements when they need to, and then pulling back out and making it a little lighter, like taking the edge off when they need to too, that I didn't find it super upsetting. And I just really enjoyed it. Like the Talisman, I was like, when is this ever going to end? And I'm not enjoying this. And with this one, I was like, when is this going to end? But I kind of, I don't want it to end. So, and I loved the ending. So
yeah.
So 3.5.
Cool. Flieger.
So as a sequel, you have to bring in some of the stuff that came before, right? From the Talisman. And I'm generally not a fan of the style or genre, or whatever you say, device of a character forgets and has a journey where they have to start to remember.
Yeah.
To me, that's the big tension is like, will they remember? It's a will they, won't they? And that's just not what I like. I'd rather they remember and then add to the lore. Mm-hmm. However, this doesn't rely on that too much, but there is some frustration where it's like, as a reader, you already know the backstory. So reading a character that's like, I forgot this, you're like, oh, we know you're going to get there, right? It doesn't create that tension for me. The only time that's ever worked for me was in the movie Hook, when they're like, you're doing it, Peter. You know? That being said, I think the first 2/3 of this book feels very different than the final third. I liked a lot of the lore, adding to the Dark Tower stuff, obviously. I had fun with it. I think it's definitely way better than the Talisman. However, I actually like Dr. Sleep better than this. So
same.
With that being said, I would give this a 3.25 bright red Pennywise clown noses.
2.5. Wait, we've never done that before, have we?
Well, I agree with Jen's point too.
There's nothing in the rule book that says that dogs play basketball.
You and what army?
What if I was like, no, both of you, we're rounding up to 4. That's it.
There's not a lot of strong female characters, and you know, Caffrey liked that apparently, and he won't let me give my rating. But I want to speak my truth and give 3.25.
It's so toxic.
Sorry, no, I know Caffrey agrees that could have been improved. But my MVP as an olive branch, I'll say, is also the Thunder 5. They were like the Planeteers of the biker world.
Yeah.
Love it. I'm gonna give it 3.5 bright red Pennywise clown noses. I like this book. I remember loving it when I first read it because I think I got a real jolt and a real jolt of surprise and energy from how much Dark Tower content was in there. I was so hungry for Dark Tower content. Now that I've read the whole thing, and I realize how much of that stuff is like, I love the whole final sequence where they go deep into the Black House. Although I've always felt like there's this, I think in the Entertainment Weekly review, they talk about it like the journey into Black House comprises a great deal of the book.
Yeah.
Which I found very surprising because I was like, that's like such a small part. And if I have a disappointment in this book, and I haven't really voiced this, I wish we just spent more time in there. We get like 4 pages of,
I mean, I guess the biker sequence, but that's not going into it the way that they do in the end, you know, I guess, but even if you count that, it's not.
Not to interrupt your conclusion, Randall, but it's scarier outside the house than it is inside. And we get a lot more information there.
Yeah, and like the description of the house, like the rooms within it, some of them are kind of creepy, like the one where there's like cartoon characters and stuff, but it kind of just feels like them making up creepy shit. And I kind of wish, and I love the idea that like the house is infinite, and that's a very House of Leaves kind of thing. Like that's a very cool notion. I wish we just spent more time there. I wish like Black House was more of a force within the book, but I feel like by the time they got there, they're like, Steve's, the book's too long. We gotta end this. And so I enjoy all that stuff. I wish we spent a little more time there, and because we get so much Dark Tower exposition, it doesn't really entertain me like it did the first time around. But I will say I really still enjoy this book. It has some of my favorite bad guys, I think, of Ladder King, and they're having so much fun, and that it does, you know, in some ways soften the darkness of the material. And there's humor in this that manifests in ways I don't see in a lot of other books. I can tell that him and Peter are like just having a blast writing this. And I think that takeaway for me I don't know, it helped me enjoy the book a little bit more than in a different, or not a little bit more, but in a different way than I did the first time I read it. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a riot. I wish we would get a third. I mean, that's the thing is like, I doubt we're going to get the proper Stephen King, Peter Straub, 1-2 punch like we did with the other two. I'll see what Fairy Tale is, but
Straub had said, I think kind of recently too, that and I mean, this is a little bit sad. I don't know if it's sad, but he said he just can't keep up with King writing pace anymore. I mean, he's a lot less prolific than King. He was more prolific in his younger days. Like I don't think Straub has had a novel in kind of a long time at this point. So, and he was just saying how that, and I don't think it was a knock against King. I think it was more just, you need to write at a certain speed to trade back and forth. And I think King for his age is incredibly prolific. Like it's kind of amazing how prolific he is. So I think that it seems like that would be unlikely. I almost feel like it would be King continuing it solo if it was
yeah. So we'll see what Fairy Tale is, but there is something that feels a little unfinished about it, and not just because it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger with Jack sort of being confined to the territories or due to his injury that he receives at the end of the book, which we didn't even really touch on, but I don't think we need to. It's it feels like it's just there to set up a third book. And will we get that? Who knows? I don't know. I mean, that's why I'm so psyched for Fairy Tale. But anyways, 3.5 noses. It's a cool book, and Burnside is easily my MVP. He's so funny. He's so nasty. He's so mean. He's so gross. And I love a villain that can just unabashedly be fucking evil with no complexity. And I don't want that all the time, because it's like just eating sugar all the time. But there was something really fun about that. So yeah, that was Black House. This was fun. Guys, we had a blast doing this. And coming up next, we're sticking on the Straub train and doing Ghost Story. So this part of our Danse Macabre series, where we talk about the books that influenced King, the books that make up the pages of Danse Macabre. So we're going to be doing Ghost Story next month, and then our next book episode is going to be From a Buick 8, which we're going to be touching on this summer. Cannot wait for that. And also gear up for Rose Red, which we're going to be watching in the coming months as well. So, Jen, what's going on at Psychoanalysis this month?
Well, we also have Firestarter coming out too.
Oh yeah, Firestarter, yeah.
So excited about. But yeah, so Psychoanalysis, our May theme is going to be bad moms, and we're kicking off with King's first bad mom, Carrie. So that's going to be a fun visit. And then we're not exactly sure what we're going to do for the second one, but King has no shortage of bad moms. So yeah, find me there at Jim Ferratu on socials. I'm writing a lot about Firestarter and Firestarter Rekindled, and the original Firestarter. I have a bit of an obsession, and Firestarter in 11. And so follow me there, and follow Psycho A-Pod for that Carrie episode.
Well, that's a good stuff. Dan, where can people find you online?
You can find me at DW Caffrey on Instagram and Twitter, and over at the Halloweenies Pod, where we're currently, I guess technically we're in the middle of our Evil Dead season. I was gonna say we're not in the middle, but there's only like a few movies, so yeah. But yeah, so find me online, say hi, and we can talk about motorcycles. It'll be fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. This was so much fun, and let's sign off with a long days and pleasant night.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.